One day, a fracture ripped open the sky itself. From that lie, blue mana rained down on humanity like a cosmic storm. It settled inside every body, but only a handful were blessed with an overwhelming share. Those chosen few were later called the Awakened, people capable of acquiring extraordinary abilities. The mana rain eventually stopped, yet the crack in the sky never faded away. Soon after, gates began appearing all across the world. Each gate led to a dungeon crawling with monsters. To keep those otherworldly creatures from spilling into the human realm, the Awakened were sent in to wipe them out. One of them was the main character, Shin Jong-sung, whose body had absorbed mana only at a D rank level. Despite that, the boy managed to awaken a rare ability known as Weapon Creator. However, his low mana pool kept him from joining any monster hunting team. Then, a miracle happened, as the Dawan Guild accepted him as a support. With them, the main character stepped into his very first dungeon. The entire team was wiped out during the battle with the main monster. Jong-sung himself was left hanging by a thread, staring death right in the face. But he refused to go down like that. At the very last moment, a system appeared, notifying him of the player's status assignment. Along with it came memories from his past life. His body was flooded with mana and a power he had never known before. Using the knowledge he gained, the boy found a way to defeat the monster. Even so, he could not fully grasp what was happening to him. The long-awaited day finally arrived for Jong-sung. For the first time, he would enter a dungeon as a support. However, he arrived late. Luckily, the team did not give him a hard time about it, as the female fighter and the C-rank defender waited patiently. By then, the group leader Toyun, a B-rank hunter, and the mage had already entered the dungeon. Jong-sung focused on proving himself useful. The Dawan Guild was the first to agree to take him in. Inside the gate, Toyun explained that Jong-sung should not stand too close to the fighters, or he might get dragged into the fight. At the same time, standing too far away was also a bad call, since they would not be able to protect him. The boy's job was to create daggers at the right moment. Doing that required at least 20 seconds. Suddenly, the mage sensed the presence of monsters. One of those energies was insanely strong, leading the hunter to assume it was the boss. The dungeon's native creatures turned out to be crystalline lizards. The team jumped into action fast, with the defender making the first move. One monster was taken out by the female fighter. Using fire magic, the mage instantly erased 2 more creatures. Their teamwork was so clean and synchronized that Jong-sung froze in pure awe. The group leader quickly snapped him back to the task of creating weapons. After receiving a dagger, Toyun activated the shadow weapon skill. With a single strike, the boss was completely annihilated. After that, the weapon dissolved into nothing. No one was injured. The main character blamed himself for losing focus. However, the team was satisfied with his performance. They needed Jong-sung, since ordinary weapons could not withstand the leader's ability and vanished after being used. Thanks to the boy's power to create weapons, Toyun saved a ridiculous amount of money. Suddenly, the ground began to shake. The ice wall started to crumble. A new path opened up ahead. The hunters hoped it would lead to treasure, since the dungeon boss had already been taken down. The mage could not sense any remaining energy either. Because of that, the team decided to check out the area. But everything ended in absolute disaster. That path led straight to an ice monster whose rank was way higher than it ever should have been. It caught up to Jong-sung and landed a brutal blow. By then, every other member of the team was already dead. The boy tried to defend himself with a dagger he had created with his own ability. But the icy abomination easily brushed that attempt aside. The enraged creature slammed the ice, tearing it apart and opening a massive breach. Jong-sung fell through and plunged into the freezing water below. He knew he was far too weak to fight the ice monster, yet he refused to die. The main character had finally found a team that actually needed him, and yet they were all gone. The moment came when the boy could no longer hold his breath. That was when the system appeared before him. It announced that Jong-sung had fulfilled every condition required to become a player. On top of that, he was eligible to receive a reward. The boy was completely lost, unable to grasp what was even happening anymore. Pushed to the absolute limit, Jong-sung activated the option to claim the reward. In the next instant, memories from his past life surged into him, and his body overflowed with mana. Jong-sung broke free from the watery prison and once again stood before the monster. Now he was no longer limited to a single dagger, but could create them in massive numbers. The main character assaulted the creature with a storm of blades. Strange and unfamiliar memories kept spinning through his mind. At the same time, the ice monster launched another attack. A miracle occurred, as the hero managed to block the strike. More than that, he now understood that he was facing a golem-like monster. It had no weak points and was capable of regenerating itself. Suddenly, Jung-sung realized that attacking from every direction at once was the only way to win. In an instant, the boy formed a net around the enemy. Now he was able to restrain and control the monster. Meanwhile, all around the net's perimeter, Jung-sung began creating daggers one after another. Then, he unleashed every single weapon at the monster simultaneously. The main character claimed victory. The ability known as World of the Net had belonged to him before, but Jung-sung had never imagined it could be used as an offensive skill. Suddenly, energy began spilling out from the monster's body. The system announced the activation of the passive skill, Magic Absorption. This was something the boy had never encountered before, and he still did not understand what the term past life truly meant. Within those memories, Jung-sung clearly saw himself. His world had been destroyed. He assumed that all those terrifying events could still happen in the future. Yet, it also felt like a chance to change everything. Compared to those memories, Jung-sung's current life differed in several ways. His skill list was updated with new entries, including rent payment and link. In addition, the system granted the main character the title of player. That was the title given to the chosen among the awakened. The leader of Jung-sung's first team, To-yun, was also a player, one of the rare ones able to see the mysterious system. On top of that, players received rewards, raw power, and unique abilities. This allowed them to grow at a pace far beyond ordinary awakened. Thanks to To-yun, the Daewon Guild rose to first-class status. Jung-sung had nothing to do with that success, yet it lit a fire inside him to keep pushing forward. Among his newly acquired skills, the hero also gained a passive one called Magic Absorption. Once his mana capacity exceeded its limit, Jung-sung would receive a reward. The boy had already figured out how to make use of that. But first, he wanted to take care of his fallen comrades. After returning from the dungeon, Jung-sung headed straight to the Hunter Association headquarters. There, suspicion fell on the D-rank support who had turned out to be the sole survivor. However, all evidence of any possible crime vanished along with the dungeon gates themselves. Situations like this happened way too often. Instead of reporting gates to the association, hunters sometimes chose to enter them in secret. The association paid generously for gate discoveries, but permission to clear them was sold through auctions. Small guilds like Daewon practically had no shot at winning those auctions. As a result, they lost the chance to enter dungeons legally and took the far more dangerous route. Everything seemed to add up, yet the head of the support unit felt something was off about Jung-sung's case. After what had happened, the boy should have been panicking. Instead, he remained unnervingly calm and answered every question with precision. On top of that, he personally delivered the bodies of his teammates to the association. That same uneasy feeling followed the main character on his way home. He clearly remembered the gate application form approved by the association. Yet at headquarters, that dungeon was registered as unknown. That meant someone had deceived the Daewon Guild, or the association itself was involved. What worried Jung-sung the most was the thought that such incidents were becoming far too common. Every newsfeed was flooded with stories like this, and in every single group involved there had been a player. It felt like someone was trying to wipe all the heroes off the map. Because of that, Jung-sung decided to hide his abilities to avoid becoming a target. He would use that time to activate and develop his skills in secret. Fortunately, the boy possessed an ability that allowed rapid growth without drawing attention. Rent payment would play a huge role in that. A year passed, and hunters continued raiding gates as usual. Once again, one team ran into a dungeon error. Instead of an E-rank threat, the monster turned out to be D-rank. The weapon of the group's only fighter shattered. The beast kept pressing the attack. The team was pushed into a critical situation. Their enemy was the Null Lord. It was insanely tough and highly resistant to magic. The defender tried to hold the monster back while the others searched for a solution. The group leader relied on magic, since E-rank monsters were usually weak against it. But the appearance of the Null Lord completely flipped the balance of power. Despair washed over the hunters. Jung-sung was in that dungeon as well. This time, he was there as an assistant, tasked with collecting magic stones. Assistants were treated like errand boys and rarely received any recognition. Suddenly, the group leader noticed Jung-sung creating a pickaxe for himself. That was their chance. He immediately asked the main character to create a sword. But Jung-sung stuck to his plan and had no intention of exposing his abilities, so he refused. The group leader was completely stunned. They were all about to die, and the assistant was still holding back. There was no way out. Jung-sung agreed to fulfill the request, only if, after clearing the gate, everyone forgot about his ability. On top of that, he demanded to be paid a support's wage. The team leader bristled at that. However, the main character guaranteed that with his weapon, the hunters would definitely clear the dungeon. Meanwhile, the association proposed cooperation to the Guild of Mass Slaughter, one of the top 3 largest guilds. They were forced into it, since rank errors in dungeons had become a regular occurrence. Normally, situations like that ended with everyone dead, yet the news reported a successful clear of a dungeon with a rank error. The guildmaster Tae-hyun noticed Jong-sung on the screen and felt he looked familiar. Not long ago, the man had been near an A-rank dungeon with an error. He had seen the main character there, back then part of the team as an assistant. Successful clears of error-ridden dungeons could be counted on one hand, and Jong-sung had already been part of 2 such lucky teams. Tae-hyun sensed that this was no coincidence. The Hunter Association was responsible for analyzing gates and announcing dungeon ranks. Because of the countless mistakes, the association had come under heavy criticism. On top of that, the Guild Master of Mass Slaughter had problems of his own. No weapon could withstand his ability. That was why he was searching for someone capable of forging at least an A-rank weapon for him. Out of all the options, the best his secretary Hisu had found was a B-rank sword forged by a Japanese smith. Suddenly, a guild staff member reported that their people had ended up in a gate with an error. A dungeon previously ranked D had now escalated to C rank. Tae-hyun decided to head out personally to provide support. A swarm of journalists bombarded the guild master with questions, but his focus was locked solely on the situation inside the dungeon. The hunters had already been inside for 2 hours, so Tae-hyun prepared himself for the worst. He always carried a suitcase filled with weapons. Still, he chose to test the sword obtained by his secretary first. Hisu was a B-rank support with the ability to open hidden storage space. That was why she kept the weapon inside a tiny handbag. The man activated the skill Encroachment and struck the gate. This ability could shatter any barrier-type wall. However, only the user could pass through that path. After the skill was used, the weapon began to crumble apart. Tae-hyun entered the dungeon carrying his suitcase. Almost immediately near the entrance lay several slain D-rank lizard men. The man pressed on deeper. He feared he would witness a horrifying scene ahead. Instead, he was left speechless. The team was still alive and fighting the monsters together. Suddenly, one of the fighters lost his weapon. The lizard man attacked, but failed to land the hit. The strike was stopped by Jong-sung's weapon. Tae-hyun initially thought it was magic, but then he realized it was the work of the main character. Jong-sung began counting the hunters. He knew for a fact that 9 people had entered the gate, yet now there were 10. The lizardmen started gaining the upper hand. The guildmaster rushed in to help, grabbing one of his swords. No one could have imagined that Yoon Tae-hyun himself would show up to back them up. The guildmaster launched an attack on the monster. First, he stripped the lizardman of its weapon. Then he shredded it in a single, decisive strike. Tae-hyun restrained the power of his ability, yet his sword still began to break apart. Now the man could do nothing but block the monster's blows. To go on the offensive, he needed another sword. Jong-sung noticed that immediately. He realized the guildmaster's weapon could not endure the strain of his ability. The main character offered his own sword, on the condition that Tae-hyun would forget about his abilities. The man was impressed by Jong-sung's skill, but he did not agree to the condition. The main character began dissolving the weapon he had created. Only then did the guildmaster promise to forget everything. With a new sword and renewed strength, Tae-hyun charged back into the fight. From merely trying to block an attack, the enemy's weapon shattered apart. The guildmaster realized that the assistant was far from ordinary, and that his creations carried power of their own. He decided to test just how strong the sword in his hand really was. The man delivered the first strike. Then he hurried to attack again, afraid the sword might fall apart. Tae-hyun pierced straight through the lizard man's skull. To his surprise, not a single scratch appeared on the blade. The rescue team began expressing their gratitude for being saved. All of them admitted that they had held on thanks to Jong-sung's weapons. The assistant seriously caught Tae-hyun's interest, and he wanted to know more about him. However, the main character only gave his name. He was already preparing to leave the dungeon, but the guildmaster asked him to accompany him to the boss room. Since this was a dungeon with a rank error, extra caution would not hurt. Jong-sung agreed, even though he was confident his sword would not break. The boss was no ordinary foe, as the hunters faced a C-rank lizard lord. Despite its small size, the creature surpassed others of its kind in both strength and speed. Out of habit, Tae-hyun prepared to deal with the monster quickly, while his weapon was still intact. The lizard lord was not alone, as a gigantic reptile capable of spewing flames lay beside it. That creature was the first to leap into battle. This time, Tae-hyun evaded the attack. For him, using his strength efficiently was critical. As a result, the guildmaster focused his attention on the boss. Their swords collided, yet neither side managed to land a hit. The dungeon boss mounted the massive reptile. At its command, the creature unleashed a fiery assault. At that moment, Taehyun noticed an unfamiliar barrier forming in front of him. It was a defensive shield created by the main character. Once again, the boy managed to astonish the guildmaster. Just how many abilities was this assistant still hiding? While Taehyun was distracted, the reptile lord hurled a chain around his sword. The man did not resist much, deliberately stalling to learn more about Jong-sung. But then the lizard lord yanked the chain, nearly flinging Taehyun straight into the reptile's jaws. Once again, the main character was forced to step in. He nullified the seized weapon and instantly recreated it in a different position. That opening was enough for Taehyun to strike and destroy the reptile. Now it was the boss's turn. The guildmaster went on the offensive. The lizard lord lost an arm. Only then did it realize that the assistant had to be eliminated first. It charged straight at Jong-sung. The boy did not even flinch, blocking the attack with a shield he had created. At the same time, Taehyun arrived to finish the monster off for good. The hunters exited the gate. Journalists immediately swarmed the guildmaster with endless questions. Every hunter on the team claimed they had survived thanks solely to Taehyun. Meanwhile, the main character handed over the bags of mana stones and hurried away from the scene. The guildmaster had no intention of hiding the truth. Everything could have ended far worse if not for Jong-sung. Yet the team had no idea what Taehyun was talking about. They had all forgotten that the assistant had created the weapons that allowed them to hold out for so long. Taehyun recalled how the assistant had demanded everyone forget his abilities once they left the dungeon. The boy had not handed over the weapons until Taehyun agreed to that condition. The guildmaster realized that Jong-sung had used the ability known as rent payment. But how could a D-rank support wield an A-rank ability, or even something beyond that? The main character was nowhere to be found, and Taehyun rushed out hoping to catch up to him. It was all in vain. Fortunately, Taehyun knew his name, meaning he would be able to find that extraordinary assistant sooner or later. And so it happened, as Secretary Minhisu quickly pinpointed the main character's location. Still, she could not understand why a D-rank support had drawn such intense interest from the guildmaster. Which made sense, since only Taehyun knew that the boy possessed the A-rank ability, rent payment. Jong-sung's resume mentioned nothing of it, and his past looked completely unremarkable. Taehyun could not grasp why someone who owned an ability capable of making him rich would use it purely as cover. A weapon creator like that could level up with ease. This was a question the guildmaster hoped to settle at their next meeting. He still could not forget the sensation of holding the sword created by Jong-sung. All his life, Taehyun had been searching for the perfect weapon. He had turned to the finest blacksmiths available. The man could destroy monsters without issue. Yet after the very first use of his ability, the weapon would always crumble apart. Every single time, the result was the same. Only with Jong-sung's weapon did the guildmaster finally feel unrestrained. It was no ordinary sword, and Taehyun felt like he no longer needed to hold back his power. He sensed that he could finally do what he had never been able to attempt without the right weapon. That was why the guildmaster could not let such talent slip away. He cancelled an important meeting and headed for the gate where Jong-sung was currently located. Meanwhile, the team accompanying the main character defeated the final monster. The hunters felt the power of Jong-sung's weapons firsthand and could not stop hyping it up. No one had ever imagined that a D-rank support was capable of something like this. The squad leader even went as far as deciding to invite the main character into his own guild. While gathering mana stones, Jong-sung kept replaying memories of his very first dungeon run. After taking down that ice golem-type monster back then, that massive chunk of mana never came back. Right now, his reserves were barely above those of a freshly awakened D-rank. Luckily, that didn't affect the quality of the weapons he created. Still, the more mana poured into forging a blade, the more special and broken it became. On top of that, the depth of understanding of the crafting process played a huge role. That was why the main character studied materials, attended support training sessions, and spent long hours grinding in a blacksmith's workshop. The only thing Jong-sung truly lacked was mana itself. Items that boosted mana were insanely expensive. Potions existed, sure, but with a support's paycheck, getting enough of them was rough. Right now, the main character had one clear goal: stack up enough magic to qualify for the reward. Only 20% remained. The problem was that a single dungeon barely gave a little over 1%. To speed things up, entering a glitched gate was an option. The catch was that the error only revealed itself after stepping inside the dungeon. And if not for Taehyun, last time could have ended in absolute disaster. The team finished the clear and exited the dungeon. Thanks to the skill rent payment, everyone forgot about Jong-sung. But an unexpected twist was waiting for him. That ability didn't work on the Guildmaster. And now the man wanted a conversation. Jong-sung immediately understood what was going on. The Mass Slaughter Guild was one of the strongest in Korea, which meant he couldn't afford to join it. Making up an urgent appointment, Jong-sung tried to dip out fast, but Tae-hyun pushed hard for a talk. In the end, the main character gave in. He wanted to know whether rent payment had worked on Tae-hyun even a little. The two stopped at a restaurant. Tae-hyun didn't waste time and jumped straight to the point. He was a berserker, and for people like him, everything came down to finding the right weapon. The Guildmaster had tested the creations of the best blacksmiths money could buy. He had even gone to weapon creators. Insane amounts of cash burned away, yet he still never got what he wanted. No sword could withstand the load of his abilities, except for the blade forged by Jong-sung. After hearing everything, the main character realized that rent payment hadn't worked on Tae-hyun at all. Who would have thought the Guildmaster could straight up negate that effect? From now on, Jong-sung knew he'd need to be way more careful around high-rank hunters. Tae-hyun formally offered the hero a spot in the Mass Slaughter Guild. He promised 10 billion won just for signing up. And with every contract renewal, that amount would climb by another 10%. That still wasn't everything. But Jong-sung shut it down immediately. The reason was simple. He had no intention of joining any guild right now. On top of that, the hero knew Tae-hyun would find him again anyway, so he left calmly after thanking him for the meal. Hee-soo was completely stunned by the boss's offer. She thought it was way over the top, but Tae-hyun was ready to go all in if that's what it took to recruit the main character. Only thanks to Jong-sung did he remember what it felt like to fight without hearing a weapon scream in agony. Back there in the dungeon, the Guildmaster truly felt like he could do anything. On top of that, the man spends way more on weapons in a single year than what he had offered Jong-sung in that deal. The main character was still riding the shock. Who would have ever thought the day would come when he'd turn down one of Korea's top 3 guilds? Meanwhile, strange things were going down inside one of the dungeons. A hunter named Toman turned on his own team. He had already wiped out everyone except one, and he had no intention of dragging things out with the last survivor. The team leader tried to stand up to Toman, but the gap in power was overwhelming. Once his weapon was gone, the hunter lost all hope of making it out alive. With a single strike, the bastard sent the brave man flying into the wall. Pleas for mercy only fueled Toman's urge to end it faster. A grin spread across his face as he delivered the final blow. Weak opponents did nothing but kill the thrill for the scumbag. To lift his mood, Toman pulled out his phone and snapped photos of his victims. There were already plenty of those on his record. Suddenly, he felt a presence that was painfully familiar and absolutely disgusting to him. The priestess Morena had arrived. The two of them moved according to the executioner's will. Still, Toman hated fighting weak prey. He craved a clash with an S-rank hunter and hoped the priestess would make it happen. Morena didn't refuse and immediately got to work. She formed a demonic circle above the hunter's corpse and poured in corrupted energy. The priestess offered the hunter's bodies as sacrifices. From that, she managed to grow a demonic entity. Around the same time, the main character was about to enter a D-rank gate. But instead of one of the team members, the head of the Mass Slaughter Guild appeared. He came in disguised, yet the main character recognized him instantly by the weapon case. Jong-sung knew the berserker would track him down eventually, but not this fast. Now, the two of them headed into the dungeon together. Tae-hyun tried to find out why the kid kept refusing to join the guild, but Jong-sung had no intention of explaining himself. Instead, his attention shifted to the other members talking about the Hyunmu Guild buying C-rank gates. Tae-hyun caught that moment and played it to his advantage. He pointed out that members of major guilds had priority when buying gates at auction. For hunters, that mattered a lot, bringing recognition and rewards. Absurd amounts of cash basically rained straight into their pockets. On top of that, big guild members got passes to challenge any gate they wanted. And of course, every valuable drop they earned stayed theirs. The perks were endless, but Jong-sung didn't budge and rejected Tae-hyun's offer once again. The team moved through a pitch-dark cave. A female mage lit the way with her staff. Suddenly, the hunters ran into thick webs. Everyone in this team, except Jong-sung and Tae-hyun, was a rookie. According to the Hunter Association's intel, the monsters here were spiders. There were about 50 of them, each only E rank. But their real power showed in numbers, together reaching D rank. On top of that, spider bites had to be avoided, since they could paralyze prey. The team began preparing for battle. Jong-sung would have preferred to stay unnoticed, like always, but Tae-hyun reminded everyone that protecting assistants and supports was the duty of every hunter on the team. The monsters began their advance. The defender instantly threw up a shield, covering the entire team. The mage girl fired off a crackling burst of lightning. The fighter carved through spiders with his sword. The team was moving clean and tight, so Taehyun shifted his focus to Jong-sung. The kid was about to head out in search of mana stones. But on the opposite side, far more monsters were waiting than the intel had claimed. Berserker Taehyun activated his skill. With a blazing sword, he effortlessly erased the first wave of the Legion. At the same time, the spiders closed in around the rest of the squad. Taehyun dashed to their aid. Then he stopped, unable to leave Jong-sung without protection. Meanwhile, the main character moved straight toward the spiders, relying solely on his own strength. The boy activated the skill World of Webs. From that moment on, the monsters were under his control. His low mana reserves allowed him to create only a single sword, but he found a way around it. Inside the web space, Jong-sung began to spin the weapon, cutting down the monsters one by one. Thankfully, their rank was low, so handling them as a D-rank hunter wasn't a big deal. Taehyun was stunned by what he saw. Jong-sung wiped out every spider in less than 10 seconds of combat. Caught up in the moment, the guildmaster even forgot about the rest of the group. The hunters were already at their limit, barely holding back the monster assault. Taehyun instantly reactivated his berserker skill and charged in to save them. The flames of that overwhelming power roared back to life. The monsters stood no chance against a hunter of that level. The fight ended in victory, and the team couldn't find the words to thank their savior. They had no idea that the head of the mass slaughter guild was right there beside them. The mage girl was the most emotionally charged, staring at her idol with eyes full of awe. But holding Taehyun's attention for long proved impossible. The fighter and Jong-sung had already returned from scouting. There were no monsters left anywhere else. Only one unexplored location remained. However, the team leader refused to continue the clear. The scouting data differed too much from reality. Rookie hunters always rely heavily on dungeon intel. Not everyone can quickly adapt to the strange conditions of another world. The geography and the creatures living there are vastly different from those on Earth. That's why hunters with detection or concealment skills are sent in first. They gather critical information and are known as scouts. Only after that does the dungeon's true rank usually spike. No one knows what awaits hunters in the boss room. Despite that, the fighter and the mage girl wanted to push forward, and Taehyun backed them up. He had come to study this dungeon and believed finding the main monster was necessary. At the same time, he hoped to learn more about the main character as well. In the end, the team leader agreed. He was ready to hand command over to Taehyun, but Taehyun insisted everything stay as it was. The hunters pressed on. Before long, the team discovered the boss room. It was known that the main monster of this dungeon was the D-rank Spider Queen of the Legion. Not a particularly strong foe, but never trust the initial intel, for mistakes can hide deadly truths. The hunters stepped inside. Surprisingly, Taehyun felt no energy emanating from the room. Yet the moment they saw the monster ahead, the team braced for battle. The mage girl unleashed a crackling bolt of electricity. When the sparks faded, it became clear. The Spider Queen had already been dead before the attack. Something was definitely wrong. The team leader ordered a retreat, but it was already too late. A piercing scream echoed through the chamber, far more powerful than anything they'd expected. It was Arachna, a B-rank monster capable of commanding all spiders of her kind. She expanded her army by claiming new territories and could share her strength with her minions. Arachna surged toward the hunters, but Taehyun intercepted her in time. His weapon had already begun to crumble, so he rushed to deal as much damage as possible. Unfortunately, he couldn't land the decisive blow. His sword shattered. Arachna lunged at the now unarmed Taehyun. She couldn't reach him. Jong-sung blocked the strike with his spiritual weapon. Now all hope rested on him. But the main character needed time to forge a new sword. Nothing worked. Jong-sung had exhausted all his mana reserves. Fortunately, he had brought potions along, but they could only be consumed once per day, or dependency would form. Still, their effects were instant. Taehyun struggled with all his might to buy precious seconds. It wasn't easy. The enemy was overwhelmingly strong. Arachna's combat power equaled 5 A-rank hunters, so the rest of the team had work to do as well. They had to deal with the advancing spider army. Jong-sung created new weapons for everyone. The hunters couldn't hide their astonishment. The support's abilities were truly awe-inspiring, but their amazement only deepened when the team tested the weapons. Slaying monsters suddenly became unbelievably easy. Every hunter's skills were amplified manifold. Meanwhile, Taehyun managed to inflict serious wounds on Arachna. Only then did he activate his skill. The next strike dealt fatal damage to the foe. It seemed as though the battle had ended. But spiders began converging from all directions. They rushed toward Arachna. In mere seconds, the boss began to regenerate. The spiders sacrificed themselves to resurrect their queen, and this would happen every time until the entire spider army was eradicated. Taehyun activated his skill once more, yet his sword began to crumble immediately. Now Jong-sung fully recognized the power of the Guildmaster. Luckily, there was just enough time for the main character to forge the finest sword he possibly could. Taehyun grasped the weapon, feeling the power to obliterate every monster in a single strike. The Berserk activated his core skill, Explosion. His fiery power erupted, engulfing the entire chamber in searing flames. It was the first time Taehyun unleashed his ability fully, without holding back. And it worked. Arachna and her army were utterly annihilated. Taehyun always had to gauge his strength carefully, or his weapons would shatter before the strike. That's the price of unimaginable power. But thanks to Jong-sung's sword, this time was different. Energy surged through Taehyun, wild and uncontainable. He literally ignited with power, yet restraint would have cost him his sanity. Now the Guildmaster had no doubts left. Jong-sung was a rare awakened being. If the world learned of his abilities, every eye would turn to him. Arachna's corpse began radiating corrupted energy. No one but Jong-sung could see it. Even the high-level hunter Taehyun felt nothing. To absorb the energy, Jong-sung activated his passive skill. He accumulated a full 100 mana units for his next reward. Now the hero could wield demonic weapons. These arms could materialize on demand, without consuming additional mana, but they could only be used once per day. Thanks to Arachna, Jong-sung had gathered half the energy needed for his next reward. Yet the surprises weren't over. The Guild Master of Mass Killers chose to apologize to the boy. He felt embarrassed by his own persistence. The team leader witnessed this moment. He realized Jong-sung was no ordinary human, if even the Guild Master bowed before him. But meddling in the affairs of the powerful is dangerous. The fighter and mage girl had returned from scouting the territory, but before they saw anything, the leader hurried them out of the dungeon. The connection between Taehyun and Jong-sung was obvious, but this knowledge could backfire on the hunters. Major guilds always protect their own security. Meanwhile, Taehyun proposed a contract to Jong-sung. He didn't waste time. By the next morning, everything was arranged. Min Hisu prepared the documents. All terms matched those discussed in the dungeon, so Jong-sung signed without hesitation. Even in the dungeon, Taehyun had offered the main character unofficial support. He would supply Jong-sung with anything he needed. In return, the boy would perform certain tasks. The main character could refuse if something didn't sit right, but it hardly mattered. The key goal was to form a bond between Jong-sung and the Guild of Mass Killers. In the dungeon, the Guild Master had failed to get a definite answer. Hunters Association agents had arrived for him, yet he hoped Jong-sung wouldn't refuse. For him, the main character's ability was priceless. It worked in Jong-sung's favor too. He could cooperate with the guild without officially joining it. The boy handed a list of needed items to Secretary Hisu, and she delivered a gift to Jong-sung from Taehyun. All those items on the list? Jong-sung didn't actually need them. He had requested them for someone else. After that, he hurried to the Gate Registry organization. A modest A-rank hunter named Chia was supposed to arrive here. In about 2 years, the selection of players would take place. Han Chia would be one of the chosen. After countless achievements, she would earn the title of Goddess of Archery. But at this stage, the girl was painfully insecure, and that insecurity was holding her back. With great effort, Chia pushed her fears aside and entered the Gate Registry Center. She wanted to register for the D-rank training gates. Despite her high A rank, Chia had almost no real experience. After mana rained down from the sky, the Hunters Association began measuring its presence in humans. Later, based on these measurements, Awakened were divided into ranks. But rank wasn't fixed. It could rise or fall. Everything depended on an Awakened's accomplishments in the dungeons. The girl had received a high rank, yet she hadn't developed a single skill since then. She had only entered gates twice, and both attempts ended in failure. To maintain her rank, Chia had to face a trial, but she hadn't even considered it. She worried if she had the courage to clear even a D-rank training gate. Chia's insecurity wasn't just holding her back, it was slowing the whole team, so she wanted to enter the gate alone, sparing everyone else. But that required special permission, granted only after completing a specific task. Otherwise, the team had to consist of at least 2 members. Chia wasn't the only Awakened without a partner. Hunters like her were added to a special list, from which teams were later formed. So the girl didn't know until the last moment who she'd enter the training gate with. The day of the trial arrived. Anxiety churned through Chia's mind. Jong-sung arrived, slightly late. He had orchestrated everything so he could enter the dungeon alongside Chia. From memories, he knew the girl would only awaken her skill once she became an official player. By that time, Chia would have fallen all the way to C rank. But Jongsong knew that a skill could awaken earlier, and he intended to help her do just that. The D rank support and the future archery heroine stepped into the dungeon together. The monsters inside were goblins. At first, Chia watched them cautiously from the bushes. Then she mustered the courage and drew her bow. But when it came time to release the arrow, her anxiety surged again. Finally, Chia let the arrow fly. She managed to wound one of the monsters. Her attacking power far exceeded A rank, but accuracy was another story. Only 1 out of 3 arrows hit its target. The monsters began to stir in alarm. Suddenly, one of them sounded a horn. In an instant, the goblins surrounded the hunters. Chia froze, overwhelmed by panic. She didn't know where to shoot, and the monsters were closing in. To save the situation, Jongsong activated his spirit weapon, halting the goblin assault. He didn't want to shoulder everything alone, so he told her to fire in a single direction. With that, Chia cleared the path. Then, the two of them bolted, racing against time. Luckily, they managed to shake off the pursuing goblins. And even though the monsters were nowhere in sight, Chia's unease didn't fade. Danger felt like it was just around the corner. Meanwhile, Jongsong moved with unnerving calm. For the girl, the day had already been packed with enough thrills, and she wanted out of the dungeon. But escape wasn't an option yet. A cluster of monsters lingered nearby, actively hunting for hunters. The heroes would have to wait until the horde dispersed. Jongsong claimed it would take at least half a day. But that wasn't true. In less than 30 minutes, the goblins would stop their search. The real reason was that Jongsong planned to convince Chia to enter the boss's cave, and that was going to be far from easy. Plus, the girl's latest failure had plunged her into despair again. She had even promised to compensate Jongsong, but he wouldn't hear a word of it. Instead of compensation, he asked Chia for a favor. That's how he managed to lure her into the cave. Along the way, he told her that the gate didn't hold a true boss, only an elite monster. It was 1 rank below a standard boss, so there was no need to fear. Jongsong spun a story about wanting to test his strength against the creature. No team would accept him, but thanks to Chia, he finally had the chance. The girl felt that familiar pang of empathy. She wanted to help. This would be her best way to repay Jongsong for saving her from the goblins. Suddenly, heavy footsteps echoed ahead. The elite monster appeared, a towering goblin. Mustering all her courage, Chia stepped forward, readying an attack. But her arrow was swatted aside by the goblin's massive club. 1 shot was all she needed to win. The creature was only D rank. Yet on her second attempt, anxiety gripped her again. The elite monster lunged forward. Frozen with fear, Chia couldn't move, and Jongsong had to shove her out of harm's way. The monster struck with brutal force. Chia didn't even see whether Jongsong managed to dodge in time. Guilt consumed her completely. The faces of her former team flashed before her eyes. They blamed her entirely for their failure. The bad reputation had spread quickly. Now she regretted ever getting involved in this business. She hadn't even tried to save herself when the goblin's blow was aimed at her. Fortunately, Jongsong blocked the strike. Using his skill, World of the Web, he kept the monster under control. At the same time, he guided Chia on what to do next. Suddenly, the girl noticed her senses sharpening. She understood exactly where she needed to shoot. 1 arrow was all she had, 1 shot, and it had to hit. This time, Chia poured every ounce of her strength into the shot. A surge of raw energy tore through the towering goblin, obliterating it in an instant. Jongsong managed to recreate all the conditions to activate the artifact, though it wasn't easy. He knew the situation was overwhelming for Chia, but to awaken her, those feelings had to be sparked first. On top of that, Chia realized Jongsong had anticipated recent events. Now, curiosity burned within her. What did it all mean? Her body, however, couldn't handle the strain, and she collapsed unconscious. Jongsong had no choice but to carry her out of the cave. It turned out that hauling companions was challenging in every sense of the word. Half an hour later, Chia woke and apologized to him for everything imaginable. Shame weighed heavily on her for her earlier ingratitude. No matter how you look at it, he had saved her life twice. Suddenly, Jongsong asked for the pendant. It was the same artifact he had given her before entering the cave. The stone had changed color, proving she had indeed used it. The Meteor of Perception was an extremely rare item. It could only be acquired in an A-rank Fire Harpy dungeon, but the activation conditions were brutally demanding. Perception sharpened only when the owner's emotions were pushed to the extreme. In Chia's case, Jongsong had provoked intense fear. Finding a Meteor of Perception on the market was nearly impossible. Yet Taehan had managed to acquire one in just 2 days. Using the artifact, Jongsong awakened Chia's abilities, but now she needed practice to regain her initial level. Her first priority was to swap her short bow for a long bow. Chia was sincerely grateful for both the guidance and the pendant. Then, in the cave, she felt his energy. Time seemed to freeze, and her target appeared sharply on the monster. In that moment, Chia felt unstoppable. She was truly exhilarated for the first time, and it was all thanks to Jongsung. He smiled and suggested exchanging numbers for future collaboration. It was as if he had read Chia's mind. She had wanted to say exactly that. Suddenly, Jongsung received an urgent message from Taehin. The guild leader requested assistance, and Jongsung agreed. The item Taehin had given him had come in handy, and Jongsung wanted to repay the favor. At that moment, the guild leader was heading to a meeting with the president of the Hunter Association. Min Hisu was already waiting for the boss. Usually, such meetings were summoned via official documents. But this time, the guild leader was called personally. It could signal the appearance of an S-rank gate. Taehin, however, was completely unshaken, having Jongsung's support. Hisu, on the other hand, found this confidence in a D-rank support puzzling. She suspected this boy might be more capable than he seemed, but not to the level of the guild leader. Still, Taehin's morale had clearly improved after the Arachna dungeon, and it was undeniably thanks to Jongsung. The secretary decided to investigate the main hero herself. Taehin and Hisu had already arrived at the meeting location, but the guard warned that they still had to wait for one more person. It didn't take long at all. Within minutes, the man arrived, and it was none other than Xinhua Kim Sten, the guild leader. The one person who could drive Taehin absolutely insane, and Sten never missed a chance to toy with his rival's nerves. Normally, a berserker like Taehin was easy to rile up, but he had learned to ignore provocations, and Min Hisu made sure he stayed in check. The head of the mass-killing guild insisted on starting the meeting with the Hunter Association president. Yet the guard didn't even need to report anything. The president had already guessed everyone was present when he heard the heated argument between the two fierce rivals. The association chief announced that some unidentified gates had recently appeared. Measuring their level was extremely difficult. Usually, a special device would be used to gauge them. The rank of a gate corresponded to the monsters inside it. Recon data was also taken into account. But in this case, measuring the rank was impossible. Scouts had been sent, yet none had returned. It was unknown how long the gate's curtain would hold. But leaving things as they were was not an option. There had already been cases where monsters emerged from the portal. This time, a catastrophe had to be prevented. The association saw no other choice but to send the top 3 guilds to clear it. However, the third guild, Henmu, was currently on assignment and couldn't participate. The association president promised to provide anything necessary to resolve the situation. 2 days were given for preparation. It didn't matter who the guild leaders chose for their teams. The outcome was what counted. And that was good news, because Taehin could take Jongsung with him. After the meeting, Sten was in a foul mood. He ordered his subordinates to assemble a team of A ranks. Taehin's smile gnawed at him like a persistent shadow. Xinhua Sten sensed his rival had an ace up his sleeve, and it drove him insane. In a fit of irritation, he commanded they hire Kan Yuran. He didn't care that the girl was currently of no use to anyone. Steen wanted the best team, one that would outshine Taehin's, and he was willing to do anything to make it happen. 2 days passed in a flash. Taehin's team consisted of his deputy Mengun, the female fighter Jehai, and Jongsung. The Xinhua guild was still running late, and Jehai didn't bother hiding her frustration. But Mengun kept a close eye on her emotions, though his disciplinary measures only lasted so long before everything started over again. At first glance, it seemed these two couldn't work together. Yet, in battle, they were an unshakable force. Taehin took the opportunity to thank Jongsung for agreeing to help. But Jongsung had more than one reason for entering this gate. 5 days ago, he had received a notification about a hidden mission. It required clearing a dungeon steeped in history and bringing an abandoned world to an end. The difficulty of such missions was exceptionally high, but the rewards were worth it. Some hunters could even awaken new skills under these conditions, and this turned out to be the very dungeon Taehin had invited Jongsung to. Soon, the Xinhua guild team appeared. Arrogant Sten, as always, acted provocatively. Mengun barely managed to restrain Jehai. It was no secret that the mass-killing guild and Xinhua were bitter rivals. Even the media constantly argued over which was stronger. Suddenly, Sten's gaze landed on Jongsung, and a sharp laugh escaped him. He had guessed that Jongsung was the hidden ace up Taehin's sleeve. The boy didn't react, while Sten continued to rant and flaunt. But this rubbed Kan Yuran the wrong way, the elemental master who had joined the Xinhua team. She was the strongest elemental mage in Korea, capable of wielding all 6 elements. Jehai couldn't hide her astonishment. and the Xinhua guild leader was an S-rank mage to boot. The team was formidable, even without the 2 additional female fighters. Yet none of this fazed Taehan or Jeongsong. It was time to head out on the mission, and Jeongsong knew it wouldn't be easy. In his previous life, clearing such a gate had failed. Of the 8 team members, only Taehan survived, and it was only thanks to his skill, Transcendence, that he had escaped alive. After that, the gate vanished, along with 7 high-ranking awakened hunters. There were no guarantees this time either, but the hunters moved forward regardless. The dungeon world revealed itself as a massive manor. The moment the team stepped inside, the doors slammed shut behind them. The path to the portal lay beyond. Jaehai and Mengun tried to force the doors open, but to no avail. Even the Xinhua guild leader couldn't make a dent. Meanwhile, doll-like monsters emerged from the depths of the manor. Surprisingly, they shattered from a single strike. Steen, ever impatient, wanted to be first everywhere. He swung recklessly, smashing all the dolls. But soon, they began to regenerate. Only then did the Xinhua leader activate his skill, Iron Fist. With it, he smashed the monsters once again. The entire team, except for Kan Yuran and Zhongsheng, engaged in battle. Yuran refused to waste her energy on trivial matters. She had entered the dungeon solely to see the best hunters in Korea. But Yuran was disappointed. Everyone here seemed entirely ordinary. Instead, the elementalist focused on annihilating nearby insects. Zhongsong immediately realized the girl was simply scared of them. He also noticed threads of corrupted mana extending from each doll, and they led to a wooden cross-like object on the ceiling. He didn't want to reveal his own powers, but destroying that object was essential. Zhongsong devised a plan. He conjured a shield with a spider emblem directly in front of the target. Yuran immediately channeled her fire attack into it. The wooden object was obliterated. Along with it, all the dolls collapsed lifelessly. Zhongsong absorbed the corrupted mana radiating from the object. Each subsequent room followed the same mechanism. While the hunters fended off the doll attacks, Zhongsong located and absorbed the mana source. This allowed the team to clear the entire first floor. Everyone was preparing to ascend to the second floor. Suddenly, Sten felt a tingling in his hand. Zhongsong noticed it too. But as the hunters began climbing the stairs, he decided to check one more room. There, he spotted more threads of corrupted mana and absorbed them immediately. On the second floor, the hunters were ambushed. Strikes came from every direction, but the enemy was invisible. The team fell into defense mode. Only now did Taehan notice that Chanson wasn't beside him. Meanwhile, in the room Chanson had entered, a path to the basement opened, and in a heartbeat, a tiny girl emerged. The presence of a child in such a dungeon stunned the hero, but the girl lit up, believing the hunter had come to save her. Suddenly, she spun around sharply and dashed back toward the basement. Chanson was completely confused. It turned out there was another person down there. The hero descended with the girl. He saw a young woman in the basement, looking far from healthy. It turned out she was one of the Hunters Association scouts. She instantly regained her composure when she heard Chanson and the other hunters had arrived to help. She couldn't believe her luck. But Chanson wanted to know what had happened here. Chelsea, the scout sent into this dungeon, had entered the manor only to be swarmed by dolls from all sides. The doors slammed shut behind her, blocking the path back to the portal. Chelsea noticed her colleagues among the dolls, but they were incapacitated. She scrambled for her escape. That's how she stumbled upon the basement and met Little Beth. Meanwhile, tension escalated on the second floor. Soon, the hunters began to notice the attackers' silhouettes. It became clear the monsters were using conceal and mimicking human forms. Suddenly, an ID fell from one attacker's pocket. Taehan instantly recognized it as a Hunters Association scout. The truth stunned everyone. Within seconds, the attackers' bodies became fully visible. This effect would last only a few minutes before fading. Stan seized the opportunity, intent on killing the intruders. He didn't care that they were scouts who needed saving. The Xinhua leader prepared to unleash his skill. But at the moment of impact, Jaehai's bullet cut through, grazing his nose. Stan wasn't about to tolerate that. Anyone in his way would be annihilated. The scouts regained their invisibility, striking again. The assault repeated. This time, all of Stan's wrath was focused on Jaehai. Taehan intervened. He offered Stan all the funding for clearing the dungeon in exchange for the scouts' lives. That bought a little breathing room. Meanwhile, Little Beth told Chanson that all the dolls were wrapped in purple threads. To save the scouts, the control mechanisms attached to the dolls had to be destroyed. Simply cutting the threads could trigger an explosion. Stan's patience had snapped. He gave Taehan 20 seconds to resolve the scouts' predicament. Blocking strikes from invisible foes was insanely difficult. Stan's patience snapped. He slammed down a 20-second ultimatum on Taehin, daring him to solve the scout's crisis before the countdown ran out. Blocking strikes from invisible foes was insane. Every swing a blur, every movement a gamble. Only Yuran stayed cool, unfazed by the chaos, letting her elemental mastery flow seamlessly for the team's advantage. The seconds were slipping away, and no solution had emerged. Stan was already readying his iron fist. But at the moment of impact, his skill nullified itself. The tingling in his hand, which had appeared earlier, repeated. That's when Chanson appeared, accompanied by Beth. He knew the way and was determined to save the scouts. Taehin exhaled in relief when he saw the hero was fine. But at that moment, Conceal rebooted, and the scouts vanished again. Only now they chose a new target, Chanson. Taehin stepped up to defend him. Unlike the others, the hero could clearly see the attackers' silhouettes, their bodies shrouded in threads of mana. He marked the mechanisms that had turned the scouts into dolls. The hunters just had to hit the targets. Taehin dove in, and it worked instantly. The scouts stopped attacking and simply collapsed. Who would have thought it could be that simple? The same scenario repeated with another attacker. Once the scouts' problem was solved, everyone's attention turned to the little girl. Stan eyed Beth suspiciously. He couldn't believe a simple girl had gotten into a dungeon so heavily guarded by the association. But Taehin immediately stepped in to defend her. A fiery dispute erupted between the men. Their energy blazed, ready to explode at any second. Soon, the argument spread to the other team members as well. Only then did Chanson sense something was off. His own emotions surged too. It was Beth's doing. The girl reveled in having sown discord among the hunters, and the hero had helped her do it, almost unwittingly. To brainwash, one had to get close to the victim. Chanson had also fallen under the child's influence. Upon first meeting Beth, the hero had thought she was a monster, but later, he had trusted her. And that's when he succumbed. Now, all the hunters were wrapped in threads of corrupted mana, but Chanson could resist it. Thanks to his passive skill, he absorbed the monster's energy. Everyone snapped back to reality quickly. Then the hero revealed that the enemy was none other than this little girl. The hunters prepared to finish her fast. But then Beth summoned her parents. 2 massive dolls appeared from the adjacent hall. Stan immediately launched into attack. That's when another player entered the scene. Beth's brother, Louis, took control of the Xinhua guild leader. The man became a puppet in the hands of the little boy. Now Chanson understood why he had sensed corrupted mana from Stan's hand back on the first floor. Taehin tried to stop this new threat alone and attacked the Xinhua leader, but all the hunters joined in. Yet they couldn't break the man out of control. His skill, impenetrable armor, activated, shielding him whenever his life was in danger. Stan became invulnerable, but also incapable of fighting for several hours. The hunters finally got a moment to deal with the dolls. But the real monster here was Beth. For the hunters, the smarter move would be to focus all their strength on taking down the girl. But ignoring the 2 dolls, each at a dungeon boss level, was out of the question. So Taehin ordered the team to give it their all and destroy the female doll. He planned to take down the male doll himself. While his comrades battled, Chanson tried to figure out why everything had gone this way. Beth had the ability to turn humans into dolls. Yet somehow, Stan's impenetrable armor made her unable to control him. On top of that, the girl had quickly turned the Xinhua leader into a doll. If she could do that from the start, why had she hesitated? It was Beth herself who had revealed how to save the scouts. And in doing so, she had basically exposed herself. Chanson felt that something was off, almost as if the girl had been forced to fight. Meanwhile, the hunters attacked the doll from all sides. Taehin couldn't stop marveling at the durability of Chanson's sword. Even after such an extended battle, not a single crack appeared on the blade. After heavily wounding the female doll, Jehai decided to unleash her enchanted bullet. She aimed straight for the enemy's chest. It was the final blow. The doll collapsed lifelessly to the ground. At the same time, Taehin finished off the male doll. He was surprised that such powerful foes had only used physical skills. Usually, at this level, dodging psychic attacks was impossible. Only one monster remained, Beth. Taehin quickly activated his skill and charged in. But just before the strike, he noticed the girl smiling. A strange feeling crept over the berserker, and the ease with which the main monsters had been killed also raised alarms. The same uneasy feeling rippled through the hero. In the next moment, all the hunters froze in sheer horror. They had never faced what emerged from the girl's body. A hidden boss appeared. The vampire elder, Elizabeth Bathory. Chanson received a system notification. For defeating this new boss, he could obtain the demonic control shackles. Apparently, The vampire had been imprisoned inside the girl's body by those same two massive dolls. Thanks to the hunters, Elizabeth was now free and alive again. The hidden monster's energy was so intense that even Kan Yuran readied herself for battle. It was clear that this time, Taehan couldn't handle it alone. Yet all attempts only made the vampire laugh. Elizabeth decided to feed on the hunter's energy, unleashing her absorption magic. Everyone froze in place, unable to move. Even Kan Yuran couldn't resist the suppressive force of the hidden boss. Only Taehan, pushing past impossible limits, managed to use his skill. But his power was not enough. Elizabeth stopped his sword with her hand and shattered it. Then she punished the attacker with a counter-strike. The situation was critical. Only Chansun didn't lose hope. He noticed that Taehan had used less than half his strength, unlike in the fight against Arachna. Berserkers couldn't use their skills at full power all the time. Their bodies wouldn't withstand it. But Chansun had absorbed enough corrupted mana and already had a plan. He began forging a new blade, this time a demonic sword. There was no point hiding his skills from Taehan anymore. Lives were on the line. In an instant, Chansun finished and handed the berserker the Leviathan sword. It was time for him to unleash his full strength. Taehan felt a strange energy radiating from the blade. He couldn't just grab it like any ordinary sword anymore. The reason? This weapon was forged from corrupted mana. Straining every muscle, Taehan finally claimed the new weapon. Elizabeth Bathory immediately sensed the surge of energy. The fusion of corrupted mana and fire produced an insane effect, yet the vampire deemed it insufficient. She unleashed her bloodbath magic. The spell engulfed a massive area, paralyzing all the hunters. Their bodies would slowly dissolve under its effect. Only Taehan could stand against the vampire's magic. More than that, he even began advancing toward the enemy. Elizabeth called forth her bloody hands again. Giant limbs reached out for Taehan, but the berserker's movements were no longer his own. They were guided by the weapon. Taehan charged in, shattering the dungeon boss's magic. Within the spell raged a power unlike anything known before, and it was that power that allowed Taehan to annihilate Elizabeth Bathory. The system notified Chansun that the mission was complete. Immediately, a reward box materialized before him. Chansun hoped it would contain something related to mana or restoration, but he left the gift for later. The Leviathan sword began to vanish. From now on, he wouldn't need resources to manifest it. The sword was permanently stored. Taehan felt so utterly drained he couldn't even stand. It was a miracle he remained conscious at all, unlike the rest of the team. Suddenly, Elizabeth stirred awake. Her condition was critical, as the system had already registered the dungeon's successful clearing. Chansun seized the chance to clarify a few things. He noticed the vampire had smiled at the death of the giant dolls, even though they had protected her. It turned out that the same dolls had been using Elizabeth as a precious source of power. Long ago, the vampire had saved the mansion's owners from a monster. In gratitude, they had invited Elizabeth to stay with them, and that's how she got trapped. The vampire didn't even realize how she had become part of that family. For a brief moment, she had felt happiness, but she hadn't noticed falling under control. Those people had sealed her abilities and trapped her within the body of a doll girl. That way, they could exploit the vampire's corrupted energy to defend against monsters. For a long time, she couldn't move. Then, the system appeared before Elizabeth. It told her she could finally leave the abandoned world. Her task, eliminate hundreds of unwanted guests, the hunters. That meant Elizabeth herself was a player. In her world, a rift appeared in the sky. Soon after, gates teeming with monsters emerged. The mansion's owners had prepared to shield themselves from monsters. Using the vampire's corrupted mana, they forged a barrier that stretched like a desert. Chansun was fascinated. He wanted to know how to take down the threat of the gates, but Elizabeth couldn't help. While trapped in the girl's body, her own world had been destroyed. The hero wanted to ask more questions, but the vampire's body began to crumble. At that moment, the system notified him that the reward, demonic control shackles, could be used. Chansun acted immediately. As soon as he placed the item around Elizabeth's neck, the vampire began to recover. From now on, she would obey Chansun and become his familiar. Chansun was thrilled that his familiar was also a player. He could have saved the item for another monster, but this case was special. Within seconds, the system registered the contract. The vampire instantly changed her form. Elizabeth transformed into a cat, yet she retained the ability to speak. Chansun continued pondering the vampire's imprisonment. That nagging feeling that something was off returned. Even if the mansion's owners had tried to protect themselves from monsters, what kind of life was that? And the dolls weren't the type that fought for their own ego. Elizabeth stuck to her theory. The human brain adapts to the body it inhabits. That's why the mansion's owners lost their own minds, using someone else's corrupted mana. To put the speculations to rest, Chanson searched for clues among the doll fragments. In seconds, he retrieved the male doll's essence crystal. The crystal contained the soul of the person turned into a doll, along with their memories. Chanson showed the crystal to Elizabeth. The cat seemed transported to the past. She saw the same family seated at a table. The woman in the memory revealed that she was experiencing the same vision. At most, in 5 years, their world would be destroyed by monsters. Hiding the mansion with corrupted mana would eventually make it lost between 2 worlds. And then, death would only be a matter of time. There was only one way out: place their souls into dolls. Then the boy, Louis, noticed that Elizabeth was different. She could survive. And he wanted to help her do just that. Thanks to the vampire, their family had survived so far. The boy was ready to protect Elizabeth, even from within the body of a doll. The family made a hard decision. They placed all their essence crystals into dolls. Over hundreds of years, their consciousness would fade, but they wanted to ensure that Beth lived long enough to be taken to another world. No one knew what awaited them beyond. Seeing the truth, the vampire couldn't hold back tears. Chanson spent 50 units of corrupted mana to restore Beth to her original form. It lasted only 3 minutes. The hero asked the vampire to pull herself together and repay him for saving her. Though it wasn't easy, Beth cared for the souls of the family members. Chanson also completed an extra task. He learned the truth about the vampire, and for that, he received a reward: a magical treasure chest. The dungeon was fully cleared, 100%. The wounded were immediately treated near the gates. Beth, now a cat, wasn't thrilled with the new world, but she was determined to live a happy life there. After returning from the dungeon, Kan Yuran felt utterly drained. But at home, another disaster awaited her. Toman, the hunter-slayer from the dungeons, wanted the full details of the cleanup. He didn't expect much. He knew Yuran had lost consciousness during the battle. Yet, she had seen Taehan kill the boss using the weapon Chanson had provided. Toman's eyes ignited with a burning thrill. He had long hunted for an S-rank hunter, and Taehan was his target. Kan Yuran advised him to deal with the support first, but Toman couldn't fathom that so-called trash could pose a real threat. A weapon without its wielder was useless. Still, he was confident he could take out both. Several days passed. Chanson spent most of the time asleep, still recovering. Beth's absorption skill had drained him like nothing else. He wanted to ask the cat how to handle the aftermath, but she wasn't in the room. It seemed Beth was exploring the new world. But Chanson didn't worry. He could summon his familiar anytime. Meanwhile, Chanson decided to peek inside the magical treasure chest he received in the dungeon. Anything could appear from it. Usually, it offered the item the player needed the most. But there were drawbacks. A sword might be perfect for offense, but impossible for defense. Or a shield could block any attack, yet redirect it to a random target. Sometimes players found ways to control these downsides, but usually at the cost of bloodshed. Chanson guessed he'd get an item to restore mana or boost it to a certain level. He figured that's what he needed most. Finally, he abandoned speculation and opened the chest. The item selection for Shin Chanson began. Seconds later, he received the ring Trader's Gluttony. It granted the skill Mana Leak. The effect depended on the target's positive affinity toward the user. Chanson's anger flared. He hurled the ring across the room. The skill was decent, but the positive affinity condition infuriated him. At that moment, the cat returned. She informed him that the head of the Shinhwa Guild had arrived. The news wasn't exactly pleasant. Stan, to put it mildly, didn't like the neighborhood Chanson lived in. Even the thought that he would personally hire a support made him uneasy. Yet the Shinhwa Guild leader believed Chanson was worth it. Even without Yuran's input, he had felt a unique power in the dungeon. The hero had endowed Taehan with the energy capable of shattering Stan's barrier. No wonder the head of the Mass Kill Guild had hired this boy. But Stan planned to sway Chanson to his side, and he sincerely believed he could succeed. However, Chanson didn't care about the guild leader's intentions. What concerned him was that Stan now knew his home address. The man hoped his presence would impress, but it only sparked displeasure. Besides, Chanson had no intention to chat. He stepped out to renew his assistant work permit. Stan was ready to pay triple what Taehan would offer. But Chanson refused them both. The head of the Shinhwa Guild was boiling with fury, veins throbbing like wildfire. Kan Yuran flat out refused to cooperate as well. But now, Stan was ready to make sure these two would regret their choices. Meanwhile, Chanson had already stopped thinking about the Shinhwa leader entirely. Suddenly, a shoulder slammed into him. A man walking the opposite way. Chanson felt the raw reminder of just how weak he still was. Turning to apologize, he froze, catching familiar facial features in the crowd. For a split second, he swore it was Dojin. Yet Chansun had believed him dead all this time. Days had passed. The hunter team was already gathered at the C-rank gates. Chansun was there too, in the role of assistant. One member of the group, Dojin, knew him well. This was the younger brother of the guild leader Davon, Moon Toyun. It had been Chansun's first team. Dojin couldn't understand why his brother had been so obsessed with clearing the D-rank gates. The secret lay in the items, treasures that could be claimed with minimal effort. Toyun wanted to grow stronger, knowing the big guilds were also scouting these dungeons. But soon, Dojin was informed that his brother had perished. He couldn't believe a B-rank hunter had been killed by D-rank monsters. Lee Donju, head of the support squad, explained the dungeon had been priceless. After investigation, its danger level was revealed to be extremely high. Toyun claimed he had secured the dungeon pass at auction, approved by the Hunter Association, but it turned out he had been deceived. Dojin was even more shocked upon learning that the support had survived. No one knew under what circumstances, and this was far from mere luck. So Dojin resolved to find out the truth himself. It was time to move out. Hunters, aimed for success, stepped into the portal. Suddenly, another hunter approached the gates, Toman. He claimed he was late and immediately presented his dungeon pass. The gatekeepers believed him and let him through. This time, his target was Dojin. Dojin was the candidate for the coveted player title. Meanwhile, the team had already crushed the monsters. Only the dungeon boss carried a B rank instead of C. The hunters barely managed to defeat it. The group leader thanked Dojin. He had no idea this boy was so incredibly skilled. In truth, Dojin hadn't planned to reveal his true abilities, but the critical situation forced his hand. He hadn't even brought his usual gear. The situation instantly became dire. The team leader's weapon broke, and 2 were injured. At that moment, Chansun offered his own weapon. Dojin immediately felt his attack power double. But why did such a talented support still hold a D rank when his skills were easily A level? Dojin now aimed to resolve his main question. He revealed his face to Chansun and admitted he was Moon Toyun's brother, the late guild leader of Davon. The boy demanded the truth about his brother's death, eyes burning with unyielding resolve. But the answer never came. In that instant, Toman struck from behind. Dojin barely managed to block the blow. The opponent's strength was terrifying. Every hunter fell, save for Chansun and the rising star, Dojin. Toman was stunned. He realized the main hero was the support Kan Yuran had mentioned. Toman readied himself for another attack, but this time, Dojin chose to dodge instead of blocking. Otherwise, after a third hit, tragedy would strike. Toman failed to land a single blow this round. He felt the oppressive force suffocating him, but couldn't comprehend its source. That was the work of Bet. She had ensnared the villain in threads of corrupted mana, but the system immediately warned Chansun. Resources were too low to maintain Bet. All the corrupted mana he had gathered in this dungeon quickly drained away. Only 10 seconds remained for the familiar's summoning. The threads of corrupted mana began to dissolve. Toman broke free and immediately aimed his attack at Bet. The vampire vanished, using the skill Mist to evade harm. Toman was a berserk like Tehen, yet their levels and weapons created a vast difference in power. Bet started to disappear. In that moment, Dojin lunged forward. He severed the villain's right hand. A glimmer of hope ignited. Toman threw down his weapon. The gesture meant surrender, but the villain had other intentions. In an instant, he drew a teleportation ring from beneath his cloak and activated it. Dojin rushed for another strike, but he was too late. Toman vanished without a trace. Chansun even felt relief. The enemy had chosen escape, not attack or recovery. The hero himself teetered on the brink, yet he was ready to tell Dojin the truth about what had happened to his older brother. When they exited the dungeon, they had to lie, claiming that the other team members had been killed by monsters. Dojin felt a heavy weight in his chest, but those who had issued Toman his pass were skilled and influential. Even the guards could not detect the deception. The same had happened a year prior, when the Davon Guild received a D-rank gate pass. Everything had been approved by the Hunter Association and put up for auction. Families of the fallen were lied to as well, for if anyone sought the truth, disaster would surely follow. If the culprit proved influential, exposing them would change nothing. It was safer to tell no one, for now. Dojin accepted this, but couldn't understand why Chansun hid his abilities. The boy confessed that before his first dungeon, he had been too embarrassed to even claim a D rank. But everything changed there. Hanging by a thread from death, his skill awakened. That was why he was the sole survivor. Hard to believe, yet it was the absolute truth. The hero vowed to uncover the culprits and reveal the truth, apologizing for his silence. Now, Dojin was like Chansun. He had seen it all. yet was forced to lie. Every truth lay bare before his eyes, but deception bound his tongue. Still, the boy swore he wouldn't stop until justice was served. From that moment, Dojin pledged to work alongside the hero toward a shared goal. Meanwhile, Toman had already teleported to a safe location. His body burned with the fire of revenge. Yet the priestess only laughed at his mutterings. She couldn't understand why the executioner pinned such hopes on Toman. But as allies, she had to lend a hand. Though secretly, she wished she could have sacrificed him instead. Morena handed the boy her child. He refused to consume the strange creature. Toman trusted the priestess even less than before. Yet he had no choice. Swallowing his hesitation, he ingested the being. Within seconds, a new hand began to sprout. This was only the initial stage. Eventually, the new limb would take the form that best suited its owner. Thoughts of vengeance consumed Toman. The image of the hero had now deeply rooted itself in his mind. Soon after, the airport swarmed with journalists. All awaited the return of the Xinhua Guild head, Wu Hein. She had flown to the United Kingdom to address a high-level dungeon issue. The moment she entered, questions rained down upon her. But Secretary Min Won swiftly managed the chaos. On the way home, she briefed Wu Hein on the situation. The only detail that piqued her interest was news of Toman, the writer. Gatekeeper testimony pointed directly to him. Only 2 had survived. Wu Hein couldn't comprehend how a B-rank hunter and a D-rank support had outlasted the writer. She now planned to meet each survivor personally. Their accounts would reveal whether they were conspirators or merely terrified. None had mentioned Toman. Chanson spent the entire day gathering intel on the writer. He discovered that Toman wasn't even registered as a hunter. Without doubt, Toman was involved in the disappearances within the dungeons. Gate rank anomalies could also point to the organization backing him. Even the dungeon with Bet was no exception. All who ventured there had potential to become players. Their deaths would have rippled across the fate of the world. Killers operated beyond the dungeon's borders, meaning danger lurked everywhere at all times. Suddenly, the phone rang. An unknown number. It was Kan Yuran. She invited Chanson to meet at a local spot. He arrived. Yet, he was irritated that his home number and address were now known to outsiders. Yuran guessed that Stan had also approached the hero with a proposal to collaborate. She quickly reassured him that her call was just for a chat. Yuran had lost consciousness in the dungeon with the vampire, but she desperately wanted to know what had happened. How had Chanson managed to defeat the boss? The boy said it was all Taehan's glory, and he was merely the smith forging the weapons. Yuran gave up trying to extract more details. Then Chanson warned the girl about the danger ahead. She was strong, no doubt, but not part of any guild, which meant she had no shield, no backing. Assassins could target her, yet fear didn't touch her soul. Instead, she noted that Chanson was an easier mark. Offering her protection, she stepped into the line of fire. Refusing, the hero decided to leave the building. As soon as he stepped out, Kan Yuran called Toman. She handed the rider a chance for vengeance. On his way home, the hero heard a familiar voice. The rider was already waiting. He was stunned that the boy still dared to roam alone at night. Chanson had walked right into a trap. The priestess conjured a barrier known as the Dark Realm. No one outside would ever know what unfolded within. It was like a virtual world mirroring reality, yet Chanson was aware of such tricks. He had even expected Toman's attack tonight. As Yuran had said, the hero was the perfect target. His calmness irritated the rider. In an instant, he struck, but Chanson blocked the blow with the weapon he had forged. The strike outmatched anything from the dungeon, yet it still failed to faze the hero. Chanson recalled it was only the second time he didn't need to worry about witnesses to his skills. Toman still believed Chanson was merely a support, powerless alone. Meanwhile, Chanson activated the Grid World skill. At that moment, Wu Hein passed nearby. Sensing the tainted mana, she decided to investigate. Yet nothing resembling a gate appeared around her. Wu Hein belonged to the Saint class. Her rank surpassed the average among supports. Such beings could wield both mana and divine power, and they could sense corrupted mana as well. The secretary suggested reporting this to the Hunter Association, but Wu Hein decided to investigate herself, staff in hand, walking straight toward the wall. The wall proved illusory. She passed right through the barrier. Now, Min Won could neither see nor sense her presence. Meanwhile, the fierce battle raged between the rider and Chanson. The hero flung daggers from every angle at his opponent. While the rider parried, Chanson tossed a grenade behind him. Priestess Marina watched intently. She noted how precise the hero was with his weapons. The swords themselves were ordinary, but Chanson wielded them with the finesse of a seasoned warrior, and he had firearms in his arsenal as well. Astonishing that such talent had remained in the shadows. Even a battle-hardened rider struggled against this support. The grenade explosion severely shook Toman's health, yet the hero readied himself for the next strike. A storm of blades hovered above the enemy. One single motion from Chansun sent the entire arsenal crashing down. Yet the scoundrel survived. Now the priestess stepped into the fray. She triggered the rider's arm transformation. Toman's body filled with tainted mana, his new arm morphing into a colossal claw. Chansun braced himself for the attack. He unleashed his sword, but it shattered into two under Toman's strike. The cutting edge surged forward, aimed straight at the hero. Luckily, Chansun raised his shield just in time. Marina now knew for certain that mere creation skills wouldn't save a support like him. But the boy had a backup plan. With him lay a relic Tehen had gifted, sealing their contract. The Arachnid Bloodstone. It could grant the user the rank of whoever delivered the last strike to the Arachnid. But the effect lasted only 1 minute. Afterwards, the user lost 99% of their stamina. Chansun risked it all and swallowed the stone. The enemy advanced. At the moment of impact, the hero raised his weapon. He felt what it meant to be a true battle class. Wasting no time, he launched into the next round, activating Tehen's skill. Explosion. Marina was stunned. She guessed the effect was temporary. Yet she could feel the tainted mana flowing from Chansun's weapon. Ordinary hunters couldn't wield such energy, and no executioner would ever imbue him with such abilities. But it was possible thanks to his mana absorption skill. After clearing the dungeon with Bet, Chansun had no tainted energy left. Yet the Bloodstone contained mana, which he absorbed. In this way, he forged a demonic weapon for himself, and it was the sword Fragarak. Chansun launched his first strike, but Toman evaded the blow. The hero didn't stop. Time was against him. The rider skillfully blocked attacks, though it was no easy feat. Marina sensed something unusual. The Arachnid Bloodstone grants rank and class, but not combat experience. Yet Chansun wielded the weapon as if he'd done this 1,000 times before. In his past life, the hero had not been a battle class either. The difference lay in the weapon. Fragarak was nothing like Leviathan. Tehen's sword focused on firepower. Fragarak was infused with tainted mana. Chansun felt his consciousness sharp, his senses crystal clear. Yet, alongside that, he sensed something else guiding his body. Fragarak itself seemed to command him, igniting an unstoppable urge to slash. At last, he broke through Toman's defenses. In that moment, Chansun struck again. The rider couldn't react and crashed to the ground. The Arachnid Bloodstone's effect expired. The hero felt his strength drain, collapsing to his knees and dropping his weapon. But it wasn't over yet. Shaking violently, Toman forced himself to rise. Chansun sensed that the next strike could be fatal for his opponent. As the rider lunged, the hero began conjuring weapons. And in that moment, a radiant light caught his eyes. Divine power enveloped Toman. It was the work of Wu Hin. She bound the scoundrel with her own skill. Until now, the rider had been under the priestess's control. Now he regained his consciousness. Forgetting everything that happened, Toman screamed, blaming Marina for it all. The priestess saw no other way to handle the troublesome rider. So she created a guillotine. Wu Hin tried to stop Marina, wielding her divine power. But Marina merely laughed. Above the headless rider and the priestess, a protective barrier of divine energy appeared. So besides these two, someone else was here. Toman's body was now fully under Marina's control. But she had no intention to continue fighting, as the executioner had not requested it. Activating a teleportation item, both villains vanished instantly. Wu Hin only managed to see Chansun collapse. The hero awoke in an unfamiliar place. It felt like a week had passed since the last events, but now Chansun felt alive and alert. Only the ropes on his wrists made him wary. But he didn't have time to ponder. Within a minute, Wu Hin appeared. She helped Chansun recover faster, for which the hero was deeply grateful. But now the woman wanted to understand the hero's connection to those scoundrels, and she agreed to answer all of Chansun's questions afterward. The hero knew who his savior was. Wu Hin, a holy S-rank. In his past life, the Henmu Guild wasn't nearly as strong as it is now. Xinhua and the Massacre Guild were on equal footing. Another guild, United Souls, lagged just a step behind. The hero's current life was drastically different from his memories. Now, Henmu truly stood among the three great guilds, and it was all thanks to Wu Hin. She was the ultimate healing type support. She started at C rank, but quickly ascended to S. In her past life, Wu Hin had only reached B rank, weak and gentle. But now, she was sharp as a blade. Chansun couldn't shake the thought that Wu Hin might be colluding with the hunter assassins. Yet, for some reason, she had saved him. The woman wanted to know how Chansun knew about the rider, but the boy decided he would ask his own question too. He needed to determine if he could trust this person. After all, Wu Hian hadn't reported what happened to the association, instead binding him and interrogating him herself. On top of that, there was a chance the assassins had planned everything. Maybe they deliberately eliminated Toman to worm their way into the hero's trust and extract every secret he knew. The rider had claimed no one could breach the barrier, yet Wu Hian had done it. So Chansun asked the woman to prove she wasn't colluding with the hunter-killers. The saint decided to reveal her story. She had a younger sister, Wu Jina, incredibly talented. Numerous guilds had courted the girl, but she refused them all, wanting only to stay with her sister. Chansun recognized the name instantly. Wu Jina had been the Fire Lotus in his memories, a player hailed as a heroine. One day, Jina returned home visibly shaken. She held a dungeon access permit sanctioned by the association. She believed that with this, she and Hian could start their own guild together, but it was a trap. That gate had claimed the lives of everyone who entered the portal. Jina could have escaped if it were a regular dungeon, but the dungeon's rank was glitched. Then the rider appeared. First, the scoundrel struck Hian. The saint couldn't resist and fell off a cliff. That was the last time she saw her sister alive. Yet somehow the woman didn't die. Regaining consciousness, Wu Hian sought her sister, but it was too late. Tommen had killed her. Since that day, the saint vowed to grow stronger no matter the cost. She joined the Henmu Guild, sharpening her skills relentlessly, and eventually rose to the position of guild leader. But back in that dungeon, she had been incredibly weak. When Hian hovered on the brink of death, her new skill, healing, awakened. Now, any injury, or even clinical death, brought her back to life. Wu Hian possessed status and wealth, yet she still hadn't avenged her sister's death. Chansun felt a familiar ache. He too had been powerless as comrades fell, so he decided there was no reason to suspect Wu Hian now. The boy shared his story and everything he knew, and now the woman understood the hero's distrust and caution. Seizing the moment, she offered Chansun a place in the Henmu Guild. But at that moment, Taehan burst into the office. He wouldn't allow it. The hero was shocked to see the head of the Massacre Guild appear. Taehan, in turn, demanded explanations. It turned out Taehan knew Hian from the training center. They had been assigned to the same group. Before becoming hunters, the awakened undergo mandatory training. It's where future hunters learn the basics of their skills and how to manipulate mana. A few days ago, Hian had begun searching for survivors from the dungeon with the rider. That's how she discovered Chansun's cooperation with the Massacre Guild. She asked Taehan about the hero, and for the first time, he lied, claiming he didn't know him. Hian realized the berserker was highly interested in this support-type hero, but when she stumbled upon Chansun, she immediately informed Taehan to prevent misunderstandings. Once, Wu Hian had explained the hunter assassins to Sten and Taehan, seeking their cooperation. But back then, no one believed her. Now, she revealed that these same assassins had attacked Chansun, so she summoned Taehan to lay out all the evidence. The hero confirmed every detail. The berserker was slightly stunned, but this time, he believed. Wu Hian had been tracking the rider for a long time. She had uncovered countless cases of missing hunters, and she noticed the assassins strike where eyes are fewest. Attacks often targeted people outside of any guild, but even guilds aren't always a shield of safety. The bigger the guild, the weaker the bonds between its members. So when someone disappears in such groups, their leaders usually cover it up. A missing hunter stains the guild's reputation. Meanwhile, small guilds with strong leaders are left untouched. Their teams are tight-knit. Everyone watches out for one another. Disappearances in such groups never go unnoticed. Even Sten, with his brutal streak, looks after his people. That's why Wu Hian insisted Chansun join the Henmu Guild. Only Taehan opposed it, stressing that his hunter's combat power far exceeded any protection the guild could offer. So it would be better if the hero joined the Massacre Guild. Wu Hian understood it, but how could Taehan explain hiring a D-rank support to his high-ranking peers? The hero decided to calm both sides. He had no intention of joining any guild. He didn't need their protection. His strategy was to play bait. Even Henmu, with all its resources, hadn't caught the assassins in 2 years. Better to gather more proof first, then expose the killers to the world. That only works if they're convinced Chansun is defenseless and strike again. While the hero is under their crosshairs, fewer hunters will get hurt. Plus, in a critical moment, the 2 major guilds could step in to help. Meanwhile, the priestess went to the executioner to report the situation. She explained the rider incident and how Wu Hian had intervened. To prevent Toman from spilling secrets, Morena got rid of him. For the next mission, the boss ordered the priestess to take a recluse with her. He would replace Toman, But the executioner also wanted to know how skilled the hero really was. Based on the association's info, the priestess would have rated Chanson as A rank. She also reported that the boy could wield corrupted mana. This intrigued the executioner greatly. Now he wanted a full, detailed account of the battle. A few days later, Dojin stood before the Massacre Guild office, waiting for Taehen. Today was a pivotal day for him. Following Chanson's advice, he would join this guild. That way, he'd be safe. Dojin's talent alone would prevent suspicion, and being among strong hunters would only help him grow. In such an environment, development comes faster, sharper, deadlier. Chanson, meanwhile, stuck to his own plan. A plan neither Wu Hien nor Taehen liked. The assassin's intentions were unknown, so the hero decided to act like a simple support. Clearly, the killers would watch him first, maybe even track him, and when they saw Chanson alone, they would strike again. At first, it would be just a test, a probe to force him to reveal himself, and only when the hero faces the threat alone will the enemy strike with full force. At that moment, the allied guilds must make their move. Wu Hien handed Chanson a precautionary item, a chest. The hero hadn't told her about the memories from his past life. Even he still couldn't fully make sense of them. Now he was set to meet Han Chia at a local establishment. The girl arrived on time, and she had changed a lot since their last encounter. The archer goddess, awakened with Chanson's help, now shone brightly. The two had grown close and maintained steady contact. After clearing a training dungeon together, Han Chia started standing out. She tirelessly cleared dungeon after dungeon, refusing to feel fatigue. And she achieved remarkable results. The archer caught the attention of others. Now Han Chia ranks among the top 10 long-range fighters. Though she insists it's all thanks to Chanson, the girl didn't come alone. Her partner, Quan Sahen, accompanied her. Long-range fighters usually act solo, relying on agility and positioning. But that requires skill and finding safe zones. Han Chia was still learning, so it was safer to pair her with a close combat fighter. Dojin would have been perfect for that role. Chanson had wanted to introduce them, but safety concerns got in the way. The girl handled the task herself instead. Quan Sahen shyly extended his hand to the hero for a handshake. Han Chia followed Chanson's advice and switched bows. Now she fought alongside Sahen, but the boy was so timid he couldn't even look the hero in the eyes. Han Chia got down to business. She wanted to join a guild, though she hadn't decided which one yet. First, she aimed to earn the Endless Sky Island certification. These dungeons have gates that don't close after clearing. They evolve. This caused headaches for the Korean Association. But eventually, they found a practical application. Dungeons became a testing ground for hunters' abilities. But certification requires a 3-person team. It must include a long-range fighter, a close combat fighter, and a support. So Han Chia sought Chanson's help. The hero paused for a moment to think. In the past, the archer always operated solo. She was cold, composed, and fiercely independent. But the current Chia was ready for teamwork and even wanted to join a guild. Chanson agreed to join her on the Endless Sky Islands mission. The trial day had arrived. The guardian, Nona, issued mana bracelets to everyone, passports and safety guarantees. While wearing the bracelets, she could intervene if necessary. Nona was an A-rank support with the skills Barrier and Salvation. If the team felt they couldn't continue the trial, she could instantly rescue them. While Nona explained the rules, Chanson noticed Sahen's weapon. The hero had never seen a sword like it before. It was time to move out. The hunters stepped into the portal and arrived at the 12th location. In 5 minutes, the first wave of monsters would surge. Each wave would grow deadlier than the last. The hunters' mission: annihilate every single beast. Rumor spoke of 100 waves in this dungeon, but no one truly knew. The record was set by Taehen, Wu Hien, and Jehai of the Massacre Guild. They had conquered 73 waves. Clearly, this would be tougher than Chanson expected. Nona moved to a vantage point, watching the trial unfold. The first wave erupted. The team braced to battle the gremlins. Suddenly, Chanson felt an unbridled thirst for blood surging from behind. That energy swirled around Sahen. In his past life, the hero had felt the same. But that had happened only after players awakened. Among them were the hunter killers. Each awakened received a system window with a hidden mission. The killers answered to the secret guild, Empty Fantasy. Their leader and ultimate goals remained a mystery. The assassins thrived for years, slaying players inside dungeons. Chanson had crossed paths with them multiple times, and he learned they were given covert assignments. When he tried to find out their rewards, the villains would simply explode. That was their punishment for failure. This time, Chanson was determined to uncover the truth. He never stopped watching Sahen either. By the fifth wave, Sahen was obliterating monsters solo. Chia explained he hated interference. As a berserk, he still struggled to control his battle rage. Yet Chansun felt Sahen's fighting style screamed assassin. The boy completely ignored blind spots. Luckily, Han Chia covered them. She instantly struck down monsters behind her partner. That was usually how they operated. Sahen handled the front lines. Chia cleared anything lurking in blind spots. Chansun's mission: monitor Seihin and step in only when needed. The sixth wave arrived, feral beasts. Then came the lizard folk. The team crushed the eighth wave, skeletons, and the ninth, orc warriors. Chansun felt his mana might not last much longer. The rest of the team had already spent much of their energy. The 10th wave loomed. Suddenly, the difficulty spiked. 2 trolls appeared. Something had gone off script. Sahen began dodging their heavy blows. Chia decided to distract one troll, easing the burden on her partner. She aimed for the monster's arm, but it was wasted effort. Trolls could regenerate limbs. To be effective, the strike had to hit the head. Chansun sprang into action. He immobilized one troll with chains. Suddenly, another monster charged to aid its kin. Normally, trolls act on simple instincts, but something strange was happening. Chansun readied himself to strike. At that moment, the Guardian appeared. She blocked the troll's assault. Then she revealed a portal glitch had spawned far stronger monsters than usual. Using teleportation, Nona whisked Chansun and Chia to the lobby. Instantly, an alert from the Skybound Island security department rang out. Everyone was ordered to evacuate due to the emergence of new portals. Nona returned to the dungeon to rescue Sahen. Meanwhile, Chia and Chansun rushed to exit the building. In truth, all this chaos had been orchestrated by the priestess and the recluse Yurim. Yurim used his skill, rules, and commanded a security officer to make the announcement. On surveillance feeds, Marina spotted a familiar support class. She hadn't expected to see him here, but today, the priestess had no time for Chansun. She had another mission. Meanwhile, Nona scoured the dungeon for Sahen. Mysteriously, the trolls vanished. Sahen stood motionless before a system window that had suddenly appeared. He received a hidden mission, visible only to him. The secretary immediately reported the emergency on the islands to Tehen. The association was requesting help once again, but the guild master couldn't arrive personally since Chansun had asked him not to appear. Jehai and Menguna were also absent from the office, leaving no one to dispatch. Only 1 A-rank hunter remained, 5 B ranks, and 3 C ranks. Clearly, that wasn't enough. Taehin relaxed slightly upon learning that the Shinhwa Guild had also been called for aid, so he decided to wait. Meanwhile, the head of the service squad, Donju, hurried to the scene with his assistant Soel. Both were awakened but unregistered as hunters, never having entered a dungeon. As a precaution, Sol brought her staff. She hadn't left her stun gun behind either. The special unit under Li Shente's command had already arrived on the islands. He also led the Skeleton Guild. Donju noticed that none of the 3 major guilds had arrived yet. He sent out requests for assistance to all of them. Various malfunctions were frequent on the Skybound Islands. But this time, the office communications were completely severed, and representatives of the association were nowhere to be seen. Or perhaps someone had exploited their certifications. Donju felt something strange was unfolding. Not all hunters had even managed to evacuate. He was about to wait a little longer, but Shente insisted on reconnaissance. He was confident his guild's forces were sufficient, so he rushed to the mission. Donju understood Shente's drive. He didn't want to miss the reward. Yet a sense of unease gnawed at the squad leader. Moreover, the Skeleton Guild relied on firearms, which were useless against monsters. Everything only changed once the group leader's skill came into play. He enchanted the weapons, embedding mana into the bullets to battle the monsters. Yet Donju had zero trust in this figure. In the past, Shente had run illegal hunter operations and conducted unauthorized gate clears. But there was no choice. The service squad set out alongside the hunters for reconnaissance. Yet these people only hindered the priestess from executing her plan. She intended to eliminate them all. The recluse Yurim, however, had no interest in killing and remained unusually calm. Luckily for him, the priestess couldn't kill him until the plan reached its conclusion. Marina needed just a bit more time to gather mana to seal the gates, and she would force Yurim to participate. The special unit, together with Donju and Sol, headed toward the security department. Donju recorded every moment on video for reporting purposes. The first priority, rescue the Guardian, 5 security office members, and Sahen. They opened the department doors and were met with a horrifying scene. The office members were dead. Shente tried to reach someone via radio. A familiar voice responded, but the method of communication was completely different. The hunters realized immediately. They weren't dealing with mere monsters. Shente commanded his subordinates to protect Donju and Soel. But at that moment, an attack descended from above on the squad leader. It was the priestess's demonic entity. Luckily, Shente blocked the strike. By now, 2 hunters from the Shinhwa Guild had arrived on the Skybound Islands. The blonde Haran had last been here during her certification. Back then, she had conquered 47 waves. Outside the building stood Han Chia and Chonsun. The Shinhwa hunters recognized the support from the Massacre Guild, just like their protagonist. Meanwhile, the clash inside the security department intensified. Hunters opened fire on the demon, but it managed to escape. Then, suddenly, it attacked again, killing 2 hunters. Following it appeared the rider, but Shente immediately launched an assault. He unleashed his elemental skill, Glacier, and imprisoned the headless foe. Then the priestess appeared. She had amassed enough mana. Shente urged Donju to flee and bring reinforcements, but the escape route was already cut off. Marina had shrunk the gates. Chonsun tried to devise a reason to return through the portal. He sensed something serious unfolding within. The system gave him no tasks, unlike the usual rank error warnings. Convincing the Shinhwa hunters to join him was no easy feat. Luckily, Han Chia stepped in. She wanted to save Sahen. For that reason alone, Haran agreed to accompany them. Another hunter, Den, consented as well. Suddenly, a local staff member warned the hunters that the gates were shrinking. By now, the priestess had begun cleansing her new domain. The demonic entity lunged at the hunters. Shente tried to halt the foe with his axe, but he had to supplement it with firearms as well. The demon fled, only to strike again from above. This time, Shente unleashed his elemental enchantment, Fire. For a moment, it halted the demon in its tracks. A sliver of hope emerged. The gates might return to their original form. The creature that had shrunk them lost consciousness. And it happened. The portal expanded, if only for an instant. Shinhwa hunters, along with Chonsun and Chia, seized the moment. But Marina was far from pleased with the hero's return. The priestess launched an immediate attack. Chonsun reacted just in time, striking back. Now Marina was directly in his sights. He intended to uncover the villainess's scheme. But a sudden force restrained his hand. The recluse appeared. Though anxious, fearing recognition, Yurim stood firm. He activated his skill, Rules. It compelled the target to obey the declared rules. The only catch, the ability chooses its target from those in the user's line of sight. And it struck Den from the Shinhwa Guild. When the Guardian, Chonsun, and Chia left the dungeon, the trolls vanished as well. Immediately afterward, unknown gates materialized. Behind them appeared the system message for a hidden quest, Empty Fantasy. Sahan assumed it was some illusion. The mission's essence, eliminate the Guardian. By now, Nona had returned, but almost immediately, the priestess reappeared. Without hesitation, Marina attacked the hunters. Yet the Guardian managed to erect a barrier. Nona instantly activated her skill, Salvation. And by the priestess's next strike, Sahan and Nona had teleported away. Both landed safely in the security department of the Skybound Islands. But even there, the rider awaited them. He attacked from behind, piercing Nona, and immediately lunged at Sahen. At that moment, the Guardian used her skill, Redemption. It created a protective barrier around the target, relocating them to the safest possible spot. Nona knew nearly every registered hunter, but she had never seen Marina before, so the Guardian asked Sahen to report the killer hunter to the association. As soon as the teleport finished, the priestess appeared again. Marina confessed she was merely searching for a base, and the Skybound Islands were perfect for that, but the Guardian was out of luck. The priestess needed to feed her demon child with extraordinary skills, and so Marina killed Nona. By that moment, Sahen was already back at the Guardian's home. The system message appeared once more. Only now, it declared the mission a failure. Then, a powerful fist slammed into the boy. It came from an unknown, humanoid creature that had appeared from nowhere. The system warned. Another failure would cost his life. 2 hours had passed since the chaos began. The hunter team fended off Den's attacks, each strike guided by the recluse. During that time, the priestess had slipped from sight. The leader of the skeleton special squad stepped in to stabilize the situation. He encased the dazed Shinhwa Guild hunter in a prison of ice. Marina flew into a frenzy over the support's meddling. She couldn't fathom why Chonsun had suddenly returned, but now she was ready to expend every gate she had gathered for the trials, just to eliminate him. At that moment, countless portals began to appear. The phenomenon stunned everyone, but Chonsun's concern sharpened. Infected mana was leaking from them, so all rank error gates were clearly the work of these scoundrels. Yurim fretted that Marina intended to unleash all her gates. He feared it would not sit well with the executioner. But this was Marina's strategy to claim the skybound islands, and such a conquest would offset any losses. The priestess felt confident, with nearly a year remaining before the player awakenings. Then, suddenly, a system appeared, announcing a multiversal space error. Due to this, the player awakenings would commence immediately. Marina herself was a player. Systems appeared before the hunters as well. Chonsun was stunned. According to his memories, none of this should have happened. Certainly not now. After the greeting and assignment of the player rank, everyone received a mission. The hunters had to clear 10 waves of monsters emerging from the gates. Haran, like most, didn't grasp the full implications, but the monsters pressed forward relentlessly. The blonde from the Shinhwa Guild moved first. She summoned a giant's shield and activated Amplify. A wall formed, solid and imposing. The hero stepped in to bolster the defense line. He crafted multiple shields, arranging them into a protective barrier. Only a narrow passage remained between them. Everyone braced for combat. Haran requested the skeleton leader revive their frozen comrade. Marina and Yurim watched these events intently. The boy was awed by the unusual skill of the support class hero. Marina had planned to unleash all her monsters at once, ending the fight quickly. But after the system activated, it was already too late. Marina's demon had managed to open some portals, yet she could no longer control them. The recluse suggested releasing the hunters. They were headed for the islands, after all. Meanwhile, Hanchia took action. She unleashed her skill, Meteor Strike. Several monsters fell with a single devastating blow. Donju and Seoul marveled at the hunters' coordination, impressive for a team working together for the first time. After a while, Hanchia began to feel exhaustion creeping in. Her mana usage had been less than optimal while fighting trolls during certification, but help arrived in the form of Haran. The blonde dashed beyond the defensive line, clapping her hands to rally the monster's attention. At that very moment, a rising sound began to intensify, echoing like the storm of an incoming battle. The girl unleashed her strike. Haran's skill, Wave Impact, sent shockwaves rippling outward, striking everything in its path. Every monster within 10 meters was flung in all directions, staggering under the force. Han Chia watched in awe. Hunter's strength wasn't infinite, so even Donju braced himself for defense. His weapon had been provided by the skeleton special squad leader. The hero noticed Chia had completely exhausted herself and urged her to rest. But the girl worried for her partner, Sahen, insisting on searching for him. Chonsun was certain Sahen was safe. He had the Guardian watching over him. Then Donju delivered the shocking news. Nona was dead. Yet, in the security office, aside from the bodies of the staff, no one else was present. So Sahen was alive, and Chia finally calmed down. Everything changed again when the hunters noticed Soel had disappeared. Meanwhile, the cat Beth prowled the rooftops. Her attention caught on an argument between two men. One threatened violence over an unpaid debt. Suddenly, the cat spotted a boy heading toward them. She decided to intervene. She couldn't stand by while a child faced danger. Meanwhile, the hunters scrambled to figure out where Soel had gone. Spotting a shrunken exit portal from the islands, Shente remembered that demons could slip through them. He had let his guard down, and the creature snatched Soul. Han Chia insisted on going after Sahen. Chonsun tried to convince her that her partner was likely no longer there. From his past life memories, he knew the Guardian had teleportation abilities, but he couldn't just tell Chia that outright. Thus, she couldn't understand why the hero seemed so casual about someone else's life. He tried explaining that, due to the shrunken gates, they were trapped on the islands. Every minute mattered, because things would only get worse. The hunters had to clear all the waves, whether they wanted to or not, and nobody knew what awaited on the final wave. Chia understood the hero's worry, but couldn't hide her frustration. Suddenly, memories from the past flashed before Chonsun. Chia, already a hero archer back then, had said something similar. The skeleton leader, Shente, intervened in the dispute. He insisted on rescuing Soul. At that exact moment, the exit gates expanded. Yurim announced that to save Soel, the support class hunter had to enter the gate. Half an hour earlier, the recluse had deleted a video from the hostage's phone. The priestess had wanted to kill Soul, but the girl had been begging tearfully for her life. Yurim suggested using her, and so the plan to lure the hero was set in motion. In truth, the recluse also wanted to clarify something with Chonsun. All the hunters knew it was a trap, yet the hero decided to enter the gate anyway. Before doing so, he conjured 2 swords. He asked Shente to toss them into the portal 1 minute after he entered, and he activated Sacrifice. Meanwhile, Haran held back hundreds of monsters on her own. This lasted until the archer monsters appeared. By now, Chonsun had already stepped through the portal. The priestess was ecstatic. She warned that one wrong move from Seoul would cost her life. Yurim activated his skill, Rules. He commanded the hero to reveal everything he knew. At that moment, the hunter Den from the Shinhwa Guild broke free from its effect. Since leaving the islands, Chansun couldn't shake a strange feeling. It was as if something had slipped through his grasp. Then, the hero remembered. He had seen Yurim beside Han Chia in his past life. But how had the recluse ended up aiding Marina now? At that instant, Shente executed his task. Two massive swords flew past the priestess and Yurim. This interrupted the recluse from completing the rules. Seizing the opportunity, Chansun replenished his mana with a potion. The priestess avoided the sword's damage by activating her protective barrier. As all of the hero's focus was on Marina, a demon emerged from the portal. It lunged at Chansun, but the boy quickly raised a shield, defending himself. The priestess attacked once more. From another angle, a clawed demon reached for him. At the last second, the hero swung his sword, severing the creature's hands. Above him, a massive hammer descended. Meanwhile, on the islands, the skeleton leader was finishing Den's release from the ice. The fifth wave of monsters began. Trolls and gnoll mages appeared. Fortunately, Chia already knew how to deal with them. With her first shot, she destroyed one monster. But the next managed to dodge. It grabbed bones and hurled them at the hunters. Chia was injured. No one understood why the creatures suddenly seemed so intelligent. The reason lay with their leader. The troll commander unleashed an unstoppable roar, but it was immediately cleaved by the massive hammer. The weapon flew straight from the gates through which Chansun had entered. It was the priestess's hammer, which the hero had narrowly dodged. Another now hung above the support class hunter, but it failed to hit its target. Chansun stopped it with a shield. He had to drink a mana potion again. The priestess didn't understand what was happening. Why was the hero showing all his skills without even trying to attack? Suddenly, Chansun remembered the chest of items Wu Hein had given him. Inside were the twin rings. They allowed telepathic communication and could transport one person to another. At first, Chansun had wanted to refuse the rings, not wanting to be seen by the villains. But Wu Hein insisted he take them, saying they would be invaluable in emergencies. He gave the second ring to Taehan. Now he could call the Berserker for backup. Together, they could corner Murena. But it still wouldn't be enough. Chansun decided to stick to his plan. The recluse had hidden quietly, keeping still to avoid giving himself away. The priestess, though not expecting to use it, transformed the rider once again. The headless creature broke free from the icy prison and immediately attacked Den of the Shinhwa Guild. Then, it began to grow rapidly, looming over the rest of the hunters on the islands. Marina was certain that the support class couldn't handle all of it now. She was ready to use any method to win, yet she didn't notice when the hero activated Grid World. Within seconds, countless spears appeared above the priestess and her demon. Just days earlier, the executioner had ordered the priestess to locate gates for their base. The task was a priority, since he had little time. Thoughts of the support's ability to manipulate corrupted mana weighed heavily on the executioner. But the truth would only reveal itself once the system activated. During his time on the islands, Chansun had recovered countless memories. He noticed, however, that Han Chia and Yurim had the same skills, though their personalities had changed dramatically. Even the priestess's abilities, hammer and protective barrier, reminded him of someone. Chansun realized one thing. He had to kill Marina. Meanwhile, the priestess readied herself to strike, but her staff suddenly disobeyed her. This was the effect of the hero's skill, connection. It allowed him to control the weapon of a chosen target. If used against the owner's will, the mana cost skyrocketed. Marina ordered her demon to kill the hostage soul, but at the moment of attack, Chansun's spear pierced the creature's hand. Then, a storm of weapons rained down, utterly annihilating the demon. Seizing the moment, the hero attacked the priestess. Her skill's force pushed him back. Marina awakened, radiating light. She hadn't intended to do it, nor understood how it happened. At that moment, the rider appeared. But it charged at the priestess, not Chansun. Beside Marina, another gate opened. Corrupted mana surged from it, striking the rider with unstoppable force. Then the executioner emerged from the portal. He guessed that Chansun was the very support Marina had mentioned. The hero was stunned by the sheer volume of the executioner's corrupted mana. Meanwhile, the rider kept attacking him. The headless creature wasn't finished. It sought the strongest opponent. Marina felt guilty, vowing to correct the flaws. Now the executioner decided to take everything into his own hands. The hunters on the islands were utterly exhausted. Han Chia and Haran were injured. Den still hadn't regained consciousness after the rider's unexpected strike. Now only Danju was holding back the monsters with firearms. The bullets, enchanted by the skeleton leader, exploded on impact. Meanwhile, Shente approached the hero. He aimed to rescue Soul. Fortunately, the girl was still alive. The executioner advanced toward the heroes with calm precision. The skeleton leader aimed his gun at the enemy, but the executioner didn't stop. Using corrupted mana, he effortlessly eliminated the noisy hunter. Chansan was stunned, never having seen anything like this before. The technique used by the stranger captured the hero's attention. It seemed like Chansan didn't care at all about the skeleton leader's death, but that wasn't the case. He simply couldn't do anything. The executioner expected him to attack, seeking revenge for his fallen comrade. But Chansan didn't, knowing he couldn't handle such a powerful opponent. Even calling Taehan wouldn't change the situation. The hero intrigued the executioner, who wanted to know how Chansan knew about corrupted mana. Meanwhile, the hunters kept slaying monsters relentlessly, but the noise irritated the executioner, who decided to eliminate them all. In an instant, he conjured razor-sharp blades from corrupted mana and hurled them at the hunters. Chansan barely shouted for everyone to hit the ground. At the last second, Han Chia knocked Danju down, who hadn't heard the warning. The slicing force obliterated all the monsters. Luckily, the hunters managed to dodge the deadly strike. Chansan drank his third mana restoration potion. His efficiency would drop, and symptoms of dependency began to appear. Suddenly, corrupted mana started leaking from every portal. In the next instant, the gates began to crumble. Han Chia decided to rush to aid the hero. Injured, she couldn't wield her bow, so she took firearms instead. The leaking mana from the portals was caused by the executioner. He drained energy from the gates and forced them to close. Now that the system had activated, these portals no longer served him. The executioner awaited Chansan's response, but the boy didn't know what to say. Every thought in his mind focused on finding a path to survival. Clearly, as long as the villain was interested in the hero, he would be safe. But the situation could change in an instant, and Chansan would be powerless. Even without a reply, the executioner sensed that the support truly had corrupted mana, and so he gained memories as well. Only those with memories could wield corrupted mana. The executioner's goal was to prevent the world's end, and for that, he sought allies like Chanson. But something about his methods unsettled the hero. Suddenly, the priestess warned of danger. She noticed Han Xia approaching, aiming her weapon at the executioner. Chanson didn't want to fight a stronger enemy, but he couldn't let Xia die. The executioner activated corrupted mana, ready to remove this new obstacle. Using residual mana, Chanson forged a dagger and charged at the enemy to interrupt him. But it was too slow. The executioner struck the support with a powerful punch. Then he noticed Chanson's utter lack of physical training. So far, the hero had relied solely on skills. But this approach would quickly push him to his limits. While the system remained active, there were countless ways to strengthen oneself, so time couldn't be wasted. At that moment, corrupted mana began streaming toward one of the still-standing gates. The executioner realized it was a mistake, but didn't expect the mana to travel so far. He opened a new portal. Before vanishing, he revealed his name, Les. The executioner still didn't know if Chanson would become ally or foe, but he was ready to wait for the answer. Almost immediately, a system window appeared, announcing the final wave. The mission: defeat the boss. But Chanson had completely run out of mana. He had barely managed to forge a dagger to stop Les from killing Chia. Now, how could the hunters possibly take down the boss? The monster surprised the heroes. It was a small bird. Chanson had never seen such a creature before. Han Chia decided to confront it. She was prepared to fight with her firearms. Judging by the boss's aura, the hero suspected it was using corrupted mana. He feared for Chia's safety. But Chanson couldn't help or even warn her. Blood burst from his mouth. A side effect from overusing mana potions had taken hold. Suddenly, the monster darted straight for Chanson. It was drawn to the corrupted mana it sensed from him. The creature seemed to demand repayment, claiming the boy had borrowed its energy. The bird possessed an immense amount of mana and knew exactly where its corrupted energy had been used. Only now did Chanson realize that Les had taken that energy the monster spoke of. Explaining this to the beast seemed impossible. Luckily, Haran arrived and struck the bird with a fatal blow. Strangely, it was almost effortless. At that very moment, a system window appeared before the hunters, announcing the quest's completion. Rewards would be granted to the heroes. Chanson's only concern was for those still unconscious. The reward for completing the task: escape from the Endless Sky Islands. Everyone returned, except those who had fallen. The people around were bewildered as the system appeared before them. Unlike his memories, this time the system manifested for everyone. No one understood the meaning of it all, except Chanson. Yet he remained silent. Now, the hero planned to revise his strategy. First on the agenda, enhance his physical abilities, as Les had advised. Some onlookers, upon seeing the system, began claiming the world's end was near. But they were few. Moments before the hunters returned, the rift in the sky had barely reacted. Investigations revealed the Skeleton Guild had been engaged in illegal activities. With Shente's death, the guild was disbanded, and all its members ceased their hunter operations. The association found Sahen at Nona's guardian house on the islands. He reported on an unregistered female hunter who had been killing people. Now, the association was trying to track her down. Soel regained consciousness in the hospital. Despite everything, she intended to continue her work. She wanted to uncover who was covering for people entering the islands under the association's name. Soel's enthusiasm burned fiercely. Donju, on the other hand, lacked such drive. Shortly after, a portal appeared in a quiet alleyway. A goblin emerged from it. Its eyes immediately locked on a small boy walking nearby. It intended to feast on the child. Nearby, another set of unusual gates loomed ominously. From the portal emerged the blonde son. But right in front of him, a red system flashed, activating a new mission. At that moment, Sun's attention snapped toward a child's scream. It was the same little boy the goblin had lunged at. Luckily, the blonde managed to neutralize the monster in time. Meanwhile, Chanson suffered the aftermath of overusing mana potions. Beth the cat marveled at how he had survived such strain. In some way, Chanson felt a faint gratitude toward Les for not slaughtering them all. The hero had executed part of his plan. He showcased his skills to the enemies, drawing their attention squarely onto himself. And through this, he learned about Les. As for what the other hunters saw, Chanson didn't worry. He had invoked the contract. This ability appeared when the system activated. Previously, he could only use payment, but with awakened classes A and above, that didn't work. Yet, contract was different. Its terms couldn't be broken while the system was active. Judging by how little mention there had been of Chanson during investigations, the skill functioned flawlessly. Thanks to Taehin, the hero had determined its limits. Upon system activation, all players received rewards according to their class. Archers gained enhanced targeting, mages could summon familiars, and so on. The hero could now wield the connection ability. Yet Chanson's life didn't resemble the memories he carried. The system revealed itself to all the awakened, not just players. Now they could begin developing their skills. Beth speculated that the hero's memories might be mere illusions, but Chanson knew better. He had clearly heard Les say, "also," meaning Chanson wasn't the only one to receive them. The boy remembered he had matters to settle and wasted no time. Along the way, he pondered Khan Yurim, someone who had fought alongside him in his memories. Yet now, for reasons unknown, he aided Les. Chanson sensed the hermit carried memories too. But for now, urgent tasks took priority. The boy called Taehin and arranged to meet. Meanwhile, the boy saved from the goblin, thanked Sun, and headed home. Unexpectedly, a black car screeched by and snatched the child. But this time, the blonde son didn't rush after him. Chanson and Taehin met at a local restaurant. The hero immediately recounted everything about Les and his extraordinary power. He suspected the executioner wasn't truly awakened. Yet his ability to manipulate corrupted mana was simply staggering. On top of that, thoughts of the priestess haunted the boy. He still couldn't recall who she really was. In his memories, nothing remained but Marina's skills. Chanson considered just how much to reveal to Taehin. That he hadn't shared everything was already clear to the guild leader, Wu Heinmu. She had sensed corrupted mana from Chanson when rescuing him from the rider Tomin. It was the same energy the priestess had wielded. So Wu Heinmu asked Taehin to try drawing more information from the hero. But Chanson intended to tell everything himself. He just didn't know if the head of the mass-killing guild would believe him. But there was only one way to find out. Chanson declared that a deity would descend to Earth, signaling the end of the world. The system tracked all players' stats, and Yoon Taehin's were off the charts. Awakening rank S, class Berserk, melee fighter style. Attack and strength maxed out. The apocalypse hit as unexpectedly as the first awakening. A system appeared before the players, flashing the final quest. The sky cracked open, revealing the deity they had to defeat. Chanson received a personal quest: find a way to save the world. Feathers from the deity's wings rained down, and they killed anyone they touched. For 7 relentless days, the heroes struggled to find a way to slay the being. But exactly 1 week later, the world met its end. Taehin listened intently to the hero's tale. He then tried to take Chanson to a hospital, but miraculously, Chanson convinced the Berserk to wait. The hero continued his recount. In his final moments, he realized how the deity could have been defeated. But then an unknown creature appeared, mannequin-like, an executor. It killed all the heroes, the very keys to saving the world. Had Chanson realized this sooner, he might have altered the world's fate. But then his own end came. The hero believes that the mannequin chasing hunters is also tied to the deity, yet he cannot remember the method to defeat it. Before that tragic time, the Earth had many heroes, but the boy remembers only a handful of faces. It felt as if someone deliberately erased parts of his memory. Taeyeon struggled to believe it all, yet he was ready to continue working with Chanson, though he still wished to recruit the boy into his guild. Taeyeon asked Chanson to trust him, promising to trust the hero in return. Chanson handed the berserk a skill book he had acquired on the Skybound Islands, S-Rank, worth a fortune. The book allowed mastery of a new skill, but it vanished immediately after the first use. The hero wanted Taeyeon to become stronger. In return, Chanson had a favor to ask. He needed to acquire a magical stone solvent. Taeyeon agreed instantly, but it turned out the hero required 6,000 liters. Then, Chanson began listing countless other high-grade magical ingredients. Some of them were items Taeyeon had never even heard of. The boy was racing to collect mana-related artifacts as quickly as possible, and the mass-killing guild had one. Taeyeon's secretary delivered the spirit core. Cleansed by Wu Heinmu's holy power, it held only pure essence. The item had been retrieved from an S-rank dungeon, but the secretary didn't want to hand it over to Chanson. Taeyeon had no objections. Only the guild handled the delivery, as it required special care. Chanson also recounted everything that happened on the Skybound Islands to the berserk. 2 days later, the hero visited his mother. She was disabled, and when mana had rained from the sky, not everyone had gained skills. There were people whose bodies simply rejected it. Later, this would be called a mana perception disorder. Some died instantly, while others suffered from various complications. Chanson asked Taeyeon to deliver all the items to his mother's home. The guild's secretary took the task upon herself. Thanks to her hidden space unlocking skill, transporting the items was no trouble. Now the hero had a chance to use all the magical stones he had gathered over the past year. The Skybound Islands case had been a tangled mess, so the investigation dragged on. The head of the Xinhua Guild and the Hunter Association president were also trying to clarify every detail. Even though Haran submitted her report, Boss Stan summoned her anyway. Donju, head of the support squad, also reported to the Hunter Association president. Both claimed there had been a monster in the dungeon capable of opening portals, and there had been a boss among the awakened who could wield corrupted mana. They were witnessed by Han Chia, Chanson, and the late Li Shente. However, Donju couldn't make out the enemy's face, being too occupied fighting monsters. For the same reason, Haran didn't see the main villain either. In fact, Donju and Chanson had a contract not to disclose certain information. The support squad leader had long suspected that Chanson was no ordinary human, and only now did he recall dealing with him a year ago when the Devon Guild perished. Chanson decided to share his memories with Donju, but before that, he signed yet another contract with him. He did the same with Haran. The girl found it hard to believe everything Chanson revealed, but the hero wasn't too bothered. He also issued a personal quest to the hunter to boost her skills. As a reward for defeating the Banshee of Despair, Haran would receive an item. Based on what he remembered, Chanson knew this would help her level up. Reading Haran's report, Stan noticed she hadn't lost consciousness and had received the full reward. The girl thought for a moment that the boss would take the skill book from her, but the Xinhua Guild head didn't. Haran had earned it. However, once she recovered, she would have to handle assignments with the insects she despised. Stan felt that Haran was hiding something, so he decided to conduct his own investigation. His secretary, So-hee, a B-rank mage, druid class, immediately summoned a car. They were heading to one of the former members of the Skeleton Guild. The Hunter Association president also suspected Donju hadn't revealed everything. He informed the response team leader for the awakened, A-rank mage Pak Chan. Pak Chan proposed spying on Donju and interrogating Chanson and Han Chia himself. The president approved. Only Bet the cat was bored during all this. The last time she had stretched her paws was saving a random boy on the street from 2 thugs. Suddenly, Bet received a system notification. A hidden quest. The task: locate the gathering place of strange people she had met before and investigate. The reward: the right to act autonomously. An item that lets a familiar operate freely without obeying its owner for 5 minutes. A guiding marker even appeared above Bet. She set off to explore, hoping to break the monotony. Meanwhile, Blonde Sun and his partner Ben were plotting their next move. They had kidnapped the boy right after saving him from the goblin, and now they planned to demand a ransom. Ben felt a flicker of unease, tension coiling like a snake around his chest. But Sun moved with unshakable confidence, calm as the eye of a storm. He knew this world would soon be obliterated, so consequences were meaningless. Suddenly, the blonde felt a pulse of corrupted mana. It radiated from Bet the cat, who had already arrived on the scene, and Sun instantly spotted a strange, otherworldly creature. At that moment, the cat received her reward, yet she had no clue how to wield it. Meanwhile, Sun advanced. With his hand behind his back, the blonde conjured a dagger. He could read Bet's message, a skill unique to him. He was taken aback that the cat was also a player. While her attention was fixed on the system, he hurled the dagger at her, but she dodged with feline grace. Bet realized how to use her reward and transformed into a vampire. Sun was stunned. No one had ever dodged his strike so effortlessly. Bet's next objective was clear: intercept the suspicious humans. The reward, one of 5 fragments of the source. The vampire aimed to tear Sun apart and extract information from him, but the blonde chose death over submission. Bet couldn't comprehend the situation. Sun had no mission regarding the cat, so he had no intention to act. He knew his boss would react, and so it happened. A system task appeared: kill the vampire. Reward: 10 billion won. Sun got exactly what he wanted and instantly forged another dagger for himself. Bet guessed the blonde belonged to the guild Empty Fantasy, and her knowledge piqued the enemy's interest. The PvP zone activated, a digital dome sealing the battlefield. Now no one outside could see the chaos within. Sun struck first, decapitating Bet in a blur. The vampire barely managed to activate the Mist skill. In response, Bet unleashed the Bloody Bath territory. Sun leaped frantically, evading the deadly perimeter. But colossal bloody hands erupted, targeting the blonde. Dodging their swings, Sun realized the vampire's skill only covered a fixed zone. It couldn't move beyond its area of effect. Calculating the active zones, he hurled daggers at them. The bloody hands shattered instantly. Balancing atop a dagger, Sun maneuvered around the vampire's skill zone. Suddenly, he dipped a finger into the bloody bath and tasted the blood. Bet was utterly shocked. She had never witnessed anything like this. Sun's eyes burned with a chilling, insane focus. He realized simple physical attacks were useless against the vampire, so he decided to play his trump card, the invisibility mask. In mere seconds, Sun vanished from sight, yet Bet could feel his energy lingering. The vampire lunged immediately, sensing his presence. He struck and managed to pierce the vampire's neck. During her attack, Bet activated Mist, and the enemy's strike faltered, failing to finish the job. The vampire sensed the gash on her neck was deep and struggled to stem the bleeding with her mana. Meanwhile, Sun analyzed his opponent with sharp, calculating eyes. Fighting Bet wasn't easy. She possessed skills that restricted the blonde's movement across the ground. Yet he noticed she was easily baited by provocation. Seizing every opportunity, he taunted her relentlessly, calling Bet a monster. Enraged, the vampire unleashed the executioner's hands. With his mockery, Sun kept all her attention fixed on him. Then he commanded his ally to strike. Sun's partner attacked Bet from behind. Less than a minute remained on the autonomous action items timer. When the vampire vanished, the villain assumed the battle was over. But in that instant, Bet reappeared as a bat. She instantly tore through the treacherous assailant. Her attention caught 2 more scoundrels rushing to aid the blonde. And at that very moment, Sun struck from behind. Bet blocked with the executioner's hands. Then the other 2 launched their attack. One was trapped by the vampire's bloody hands. Yet the second struck her unexpectedly. Sun lunged to deliver a fatal blow. But mid-strike, he noticed Bet smiling. She shifted back into her cat form, and Sun's ally bore the brunt of the sword. Then the vampire tugged at strands of corrupted mana. With them, Bet ensnared the blonde. She concealed her energy within the Bloody Bath territory, setting deadly traps. Now she was ready to annihilate the monster. In truth, the vampire didn't care about Sun's provocations. She created the illusion of success for the enemy. The blonde wasn't fazed. He knew their paths would cross again. And then Sun died. Yet Bet felt only that he had vanished somewhere. The system, however, notified the completion of the task and issued the reward. The next morning, the hero took the cat to a veterinary clinic. Bet's condition had scared him thoroughly. But when Chonsun learned she had fought the Empty Fantasy Guild, he was stunned. Bet revealed that only one boy, Sun, had stood out. The rest were completely ordinary. Then the cat admitted she had defeated the scoundrels and claimed her reward. Now she could return to her original form at will. The fragment of the source turned out to be a piece of lost skills. The vampire had hoped for Chonsun's praise, but he kept questioning her instead. Resigned, Bet explained she had intended to extract information from Sun, but he suddenly died. Then Chanson realized the villain's body had exploded. He had seen such a thing in his memories before. Suddenly, someone knocked at the door. Chanson hadn't expected visitors and was momentarily flustered. When he opened it, a bird-like monster, the boss from the Endless Sky Islands, stood there. The boy slammed the door shut immediately. The bird began squawking, demanding the repayment it was owed. Drawing extra attention was the last thing Chanson needed. Down the corridor, disgruntled neighbors started peeking out. But by now, Chanson had already taken the black bird. His mind was a storm of questions with no answers in sight. On top of that, the monster was hungry. Chanson found a can of cat food and offered it to the bird. Luckily, the creature seemed to enjoy the meal. Then the hero decided to try questioning the bird a little. Though from the start, he knew it was probably a ridiculous idea. Somehow, he managed to learn a few things. The bird was helped out of the gates by a friend, a small blonde boy, barely noticeable. He had sent the monster after a player who broke the game's rules, and this boy wanted to make the game fair again. Meanwhile, Les remained in a secluded dimension. He tried to learn anything about the system from the monsters, but all of them were just ordinary mobs. Long ago, Les had heard that creating a weapon required more players. He had been diligently gathering corrupted mana, but never knew exactly how to use it. Only now did Les fully understand. When the world ended, a black bird appeared in the sky. It came to hear the prayers of those who had fallen into despair. The boy didn't remember what he asked back then, but now Les knew exactly how to save all the people turned into playthings. This time, he would destroy the system. All that was needed was to forge a weapon capable of slaying a deity. A few days later, the head of the guild, Wu Hein, was traveling on another mission. On the way, she spoke with Taehan. He shared his thoughts on why the system had appeared 20 years after the first rift. The world had become like a game, created by a bored, malevolent god. And immediately after spotting the rider and the priestess, the executioner Les also appeared. Then Taehan told her about his latest encounter with Chanson. Until that point, the Berserk didn't fully believe the hero's stories about the future. But recently, Chanson had shown a photo of the black bird tracking the boy through corrupted mana. The hero planned to use the monster and its ability to sense special energy. With the bird's help, he could pinpoint dungeons with rank errors. And to ensure the creature didn't vanish, Chanson made a contract with it. Later, Chanson planned to join a branch of the Massacre Guild. Taehan couldn't quite understand. His guild had no branches. The thing was, all of this happened later in the hero's memories. In his past life, in an unrecognized dungeon with Bet, no one survived except Taehan. After that, the Shinhwa Guild collapsed. Taehan created the subsidiary guild Sanha and took in everyone left from Shinhwa. But Chanson planned to do this earlier, cultivating the heroes of the future. Only now did Taehan start wondering about his fate in his past life. He learned the Berserk had been found dead in broad daylight, as if an S rank meant nothing, and the criminal had never been found. This time, Chanson came prepared and brought a weapon for Taehan's protection, an A-rank sword capable of withstanding a user's mana flare. From their very first meeting, Chanson understood why Taehan's weapons had broken so quickly. Swords couldn't withstand the torrent of mana. Chanson had wanted to hand Taehan the Leviathan, but the Berserk lacked the corrupted mana to sustain it. So, he forged a sword capable of enduring at least 3 of Taehan's max mana bursts. The boy had planned to meet Wu Hein soon, but the S-rank healer had flown to another country. Meanwhile, Taehan focused on establishing the Sanha subsidiary guild. 2 candidates had already been selected by Chanson. A few days later, a 4-person team descended into the dungeon. The trial for new Sanha members was about to begin. Alongside the 2 rookies went Dojin and Chanson. The trial was to be conducted by B-rank tracker Jarek, class Rebounding Injector, and C-rank mage Sem, class Teleporter. Immediately, tension sparked between the 2. Words flew. Sem was irritated by Jarek's whining, but the tracker refused to back down. They were so absorbed in bickering, they didn't notice the nearby monster. When the creature lunged at the hunters, Chanson reacted instantly. He raised a shield. Dojin rushed to assist, but Chanson stopped him. Jarek and Sem weren't chosen randomly. In the future, they'd form a perfect tandem. Together, they'd execute missions without a word wasted. But for now, the tracker and mage faced the trial. They had to defeat the monsters in this dungeon. Humanoid monstrosities of gender Uvo, Class D. Before starting, Chanson set a condition. Jarek and Sem had to win using a baseball bat and a tennis racket. The boys were stunned. No turning back now, the monster advanced. Jarek and Sem gripped the items Chanson handed them, clueless how they'd help in battle. Chanson actively gave instructions. Gradually, the boys realized the items had special properties. The baseball bat could redirect any flying object after a hit by the user's will. Without direction, the object would fly into an ally instead. The tennis racket could enhance the force of any strike. Jarek had the shapeshift skill, allowing him to turn any object into a ball. All his life, he thought this skill was worthless. He just didn't know how to use it yet. Suddenly, the Genderuvo let out a bone-chilling scream. 2 more monsters approached, the Naga warriors, half human, half serpent. Dojin stepped up to hold them back. Following Chanson's guidance, Jarek transformed his shield into a ball. Then he swung the bat at the approaching monster. Just before impact, the ball reverted to a shield, smashing the Genderuvo monster. Chanson created another shield for Jarek to reinforce the skill. The boy repeated the strike, but the Naga warrior dodged the attack. Sem teleported instantly to intercept the ball. Then he activated the racket's heavy strike. With incredible force, the shield slammed into the Naga warrior, obliterating it. They swiftly dispatched the other monster as well. The rookies were dumbstruck. Jarek and Sem truly complemented each other in battle. The trial was over, but the newcomers had no idea where Chanson had found the items with special properties. They'd never even heard of such things before. They guessed it must be a secret from one of the 3 major guilds. Dojin escorted Jarek and Sem to the exit. Chanson stayed behind to face the boss. The hero discovered a hidden section of the dungeon. These spots always held rare rewards, but also far stronger opponents. He'd come here following the directions of the black bird. The creature had been perched in his pocket the whole time, shrunk down to fit. A few days prior, Morok the bird and Chanson had signed a contract. Chanson's role was to help Morok gather corrupted mana in exchange for the ultimate reward. That reward, the skill to forge a weapon capable of slaying a deity. Once Morok reclaimed what was his, he would vanish. Such was his nature. Until then, Chanson and the bird would work together. Morok pecked at the entrance. In an instant, the path to the hidden zone swung open. The hero stepped into the chamber. The space was thick with tainted mana. Chanson couldn't absorb the corrupted mana until he defeated the boss and purified it. That's why he'd brought the purifying dart, crafted from an incredible array of cleansed magic stones and cores. The hidden zone's boss, the Naga Overlord, appeared almost immediately. From her first attack, Chanson dodged using the purifying dart tied to a rope. The Naga Overlord was B rank. She possessed the skill Concealment, vanishing and reappearing elsewhere at will. Spotting the monster, Chanson unleashed a swarm of swords. The Naga Overlord used Mana Corrosion, dissolving the weapons instantly. Chanson hadn't expected to beat her with ordinary swords. He had a special weapon for that, the demonic sword Fragarak. The Naga sensed danger. She tried to dodge, but Chanson severed her arm. The Naga Overlord vanished once again. Enraged, she lurked behind and unleashed a toxic cloud. Luckily, the purifying dart had an anti-poison field with a 5-meter radius. But the monster then applied Mana Corrosion. As long as Chanson remained in the poisonous cloud, his mana would drain. He tried to escape again using the tethered dart. The Naga struck, sending him crashing to the ground. His mana was completely depleted. He couldn't even lift Fragarak. Delighted, the Hidden Zone's boss charged, but Chanson still had a trump card. The purifying dart also had the restoration property. Once a day, it could restore the user's mana reserves. Seizing the chance, Chanson drove Fragarak straight into the Naga Overlord. The battle was over. The hero absorbed the purified corrupted mana and gained the new skill, Disassemble and Assemble. Then he began collecting useful items. First, Chanson took the poisonous fang of the Naga Overlord. With his new skill, he could break down a poisonous item into components and reforge it into something new. Wasting no time, Chanson immediately disassembled the purifying dart. From it, he extracted 3 magic stones, a purified spirit core, and a giant's finger. Then, he activated Assemble on the Naga Fang and the purified spirit core. From these 2 components, Chanson forged an A-rank item capable of significantly boosting the user's mana. He already knew how it worked, having done this in his previous life. Without hesitation, he wounded himself with the purified fang. The transformation began. It was a grueling process, one that tested the body and will, but the result was worth it. After a few minutes of pain, the agony faded. Minimal preparation was complete. The hero had doubled his mana. His physical stats also improved. Agility and strength now rivaled a B-rank fighter. Chanson also gained the skill Purification Aura, neutralizing B-rank or lower poisons. He had now reached C-rank, but he had no intention of stopping there. Another valuable item remained in the Naga Overlord's body. Chanson found the monster's essence crystal. It could cure any poison above B rank. Meanwhile, the dungeons continued to host hunts for hunters, and the same blonde Sun, the one who lost to the cat bet, was responsible. For killing a C rank hunter, the villain earned 500 million won. He immediately opened a premium shop. But there, the items were far more expensive. Sun decided he needed to gather a bit more cash. Instantly, a notification popped up for an extra quest with a reward of 1 billion won. With that, Sun could buy himself a B-rank gatebreaker. While the villain browsed the system's wares, someone was watching him. An agent from the mass murder guild was about to report the criminal, but didn't make it in time. Sun found him and killed him. As soon as Taehan learned of it, he immediately informed the hero. The same events had occurred in Chanson's previous life. He knew the association deliberately withheld this information to avoid panic. Around the same time, another person was about to be attacked. Chanson planned to stop the villains from succeeding. In doing so, all the criminals' attention would focus entirely on the hero. Taehan also intended to help, but the hero asked the berserker to handle something else. Just then, Shinhwa Guild secretary So-hee was returning from work. With her dog, she moved slowly in a wheelchair. She noticed she was being followed. So-hee lost her patience and demanded the stalker reveal himself and explain his purpose. Out stepped Mengun, deputy of the mass murder guild, confessing he was acting for her safety. At that moment, the armed Sun lunged at the secretary from a dark alley. Mengun intervened, preventing him from landing the strike. The protector instantly activated Petrifying Skin. Sun unleashed the first sword technique, Phantom Flash, striking his foe. Then he swung his blade, aiming to finish the secretary. But again, the strike failed. The sword got stuck in the shield Chanson had conjured. Sun went berserk. He could have ended it in seconds, yet someone always interfered. Chanson activated the grid world and spawned a storm of swords for the next attack. Sun was stunned. How could someone so skilled appear here just months after the system's launch? First, it was the cat bet, now another. Chanson struck. The villain was fast, dodging the attack with lethal precision. Sun realized the cat and Chanson were working together. Then he activated his invisibility mask. Luckily, the hero already knew the enemy could do the same. Sun slipped behind Chanson, thinking he'd outsmarted him, but it was too predictable. Chanson immediately conjured several grenades and detonated them near the villain. The explosion robbed Sun of his sight. At that moment, Chanson used Assemble to craft a poisonous Naga dagger. The enemy sensed the corrupted mana and deflected the strike. The secretary decided to help the hero. Using animal communication, she infused her dog with mana. Sun regained his vision and lunged once more. But he was stopped by So-hee's transformed dog. Then Chanson struck the villain with the poisonous dagger. Enraged, Sun threw the dog aside. Only then did he realize he had been poisoned. Meanwhile, the hero summoned Fragarak and struck. But he couldn't hit the enemy. Sun dodged, and miraculously avoided the follow-up spear attacks. Then the villain used the second sword technique, Path of the Deathly Phantom. Chanson rushed to defend So-hee. Creating a wall of shields, he barely withstood the force of the blow. He spent nearly all his mana just to block a single strike. But Chanson knew the poison had seeped deep enough into Sun's body. Now, the hero only had to execute the final technique correctly. The blonde couldn't accept losing to someone who had been playing for only a few months. Sun charged once more, but the moment he struck, his weapon froze. Chanson activated Bond and took control of the enemy's sword. Then he severed Sun's hand. In this state, and under the poison's effect, the villain could no longer use mana. He wouldn't even be able to die and respawn like he had against Bet. At that moment, So-hee decided to thank her savior. When Chanson's attention shifted to the secretary, an unusual butterfly flew toward Sun. The creature landed in the pool of the blonde's blood. Suddenly, the spot bloomed with red flowers. Sun teleported instantly. Moreover, his rescuer restored his lost limb. The one who did it was the vampire Isabella. She had been sent by the Empty Fantasy boss to assist. The vampire now operates at boss-level strength. Sun warned his ally that this world isn't as simple as it seems. Isabella decided to gift the blonde a B-rank gatebreaker. She reminded him that he only had one respawn left, meaning he should take the game seriously. Meanwhile, the Shinhwa guild head, Sten, raced towards So-hee as soon as he learned of the attack. He was overjoyed to see the secretary safe. But now he demanded all the details. So-hee explained that Chanson and the Massacre Guild had saved her. They handled the dungeon attacks and pinpointed So-hee's danger in time. That's how they arrived at the right place at the right moment. Steen wanted Chanson's explanation too, but Chanson doubted the man would believe him. Even the S-rank healer Wu Hain had tried to explain once. Chanson prepared to leave, but Sten stopped him. He knew most people didn't think highly of him. Yet, the Xinhua head didn't forget to thank him for saving So-hee. Leaving the room, Chanson summoned Bet. He showed the vampire a photo of what the butterfly did during the fight with Sun. Bet recognized the bloody bath skill, Red Flowers. She knew only one vampire could create such a thing, Yasabella. This meant players from another world had infiltrated Earth. Their level matched Bet's before she became a familiar. Chanson needed to develop his skills immediately to face these enemies. Thanks to his memories, he knew about unusual dungeons. They differed from gates and existed to acquire relics. And that's the kind of dungeon the hero now entered. He immediately found a spatial crack. Only a few can enter. But the boy had a key capable of opening any door. The Blackbird Morok took charge and widened the passage. The hero stepped inside. The side quest began. Chanson had to defeat the guards to proceed and claim the reward. At the entrance, a black tiger of the dark forest lunged at him. Eager to move on quickly, he unleashed the demonic sword Fragarak. In a single motion, Chanson cleaved the monster. But the tiger could split into smaller forms when excess damage was inflicted. The main form had to be distinguished from the duplicates and struck. Chanson didn't need to worry. After countless strikes, the tigers multiplied and shrank dramatically. Suddenly, one lunged from behind, biting his arm, but it barely hurt. The tiger had turned into a tiny kitten. This allowed the hero to locate and destroy the main form. The first quest ended, and the path forward opened. Chanson stepped into the portal. At this stage, he had to defeat his own doppelganger. It shared the same level as the player. Yet thanks to his memories, the boy knew this would be easy. The opponents conjured a storm of swords, each targeting the other. Their strength and skills were perfectly balanced. But there was one edge. The doppelganger lacked the demonic sword Fragarak. This weapon had pushed the hero's swordsmanship to its peak. With it, he blocked the doppelganger's strike and sliced him in half. Instantly, the enemy's body dissolved into gray matter. But within a second, the doppelganger began regenerating. Chanson seized the moment, embedding the poison Naga dagger into the gray mass. After regeneration, the doppelganger's stats surged by 150%. He attacked relentlessly, yet Chanson expertly parried every strike. By now, the poison had spread throughout the doppelganger's body. He could no longer activate any skills, and immediately after, his mana was completely drained. The hero summoned the poison dagger to himself. The weapon inside the enemy's body yanked him toward Chanson. Chanson met the doppelganger with a crushing strike from Fragarak. The enemy turned back into gray matter, and Chanson reclaimed the poison dagger. With that, the quest was complete. As a reward, Chanson received a bronze mirror and a scroll to enhance one of his skills. Wasting no time, he opened his skill list and chose Creation. The scroll activated instantly. Leveling the skill unlocked the ability to fuse elements. Chanson decided to infuse lightning into his weapon. From now on, he could apply this element to any weapon he crafted. Finally, Chanson collected the doppelganger's gray matter into a flask. The other artifact, the bronze mirror, would also come in handy. Its true value had long remained a mystery. That value revealed itself when combined with the other two artifacts Chanson planned to acquire. In the next stage, the boy defeated a fox monster, obtaining a sphere and a bronze sword. He then faced a man-eating goblin. Victory rewarded him with the monster's hair and a bell. Now he possessed all the elements needed to craft an item. Chanson fused the goblin hair, the fox sphere, the bronze mirror, the doppelganger's remains, and the dissolved magical stones. The artifacts resonated with each other. Out of them emerged a celestial jade belt. It allowed him to copy skills from enemies equal or weaker in rank. Along with this, Chanson gained a bonus and became a hero candidate. He had moved one step closer to completing the final quest, which he had failed in his past life. But this time, everything would be different. The hero continued combining elements. He took the ring Trader's Greed and merged it with the celestial jade belt. Thus, Chanson obtained an S-rank item, the ring Ruler's Greed. Now he could absorb an enemy's mana directly. At last, the hero solved his painful energy supply problem. With that, the main quest, Path of the Hero, unlocked. Chanson teleported instantly to the Hidden Realm, the Celestial Kingdom. In his previous life, he had managed to gather only 6 heroes. But this time, Chanson aimed to find them all. Now the boy must complete the quest of the Celestial Being to earn the title of Hero. The system transported Chanson to the Temple of Queen Sobol, infamous for her insatiable greed. Her role was to test aspiring heroes, but the queen immediately sensed that the hero was only C rank. She was certain he would fail her trial. Showing a rare mercy, Sobol offered Chanson a chance to leave before it was too late. but the hero assured her he could handle it. His confidence first amused the queen. Then, a storm of rage consumed her. Yet Chansun persisted, insisting on the trial. Sobol, the queen of a minor star. In his past life, she had been responsible for Chansun, one of the 6 heroes who took the final quest. This deity could grant abilities or strip them away. Queen Sobol was perfect for Chansun. She allowed the use of items. In the end, the celestial being agreed to test the boy. Curiosity sparked within her. She wanted to see what this brave soul could do. The hero's task was to defeat one of the 4 evils of chaos and its minions. Chansun teleported to the trial site. Upon entering the temple, he immediately encountered 2 massive Nati monsters. Their strength and size were formidable. While a hunter team could handle them easily, facing them solo was perilous. Chansun instantly activated Assemble, combining goblin fur, a giant's finger, and magical stones. From this fusion emerged a devil mask. The mask contained the spirit of a goblin, which could be unleashed to absorb evil. It also nullified the effects of curses. The goblin spirit served as a guardian, reducing ghostly magic by 50%. With this, the Nati were annihilated. Then the bound warriors fleeing from the temple emerged. Chansun instantly activated Grid World. A swarm of daggers obliterated all except the mage. For him, the hero used the ruler's greed ring to begin absorbing mana. At that moment, reinforcements arrived. Chansun activated Link and seized control of the enemy's swords. He then infused them with lightning. Every last one of them was struck down. Then emerged the main foe, Chaos. This monster was half tiger, half human. It seemed to enjoy watching the hero. One of the 4 evils of chaos, a powerful ghost specializing in curses. Against Chansun, it unleashed a cursed monster, Yomi. Freed from its tube, Yomi emitted a scream of agony. If the cursed monster's attack wasn't stopped, it would consume the boy's soul. Chansun immediately activated the devil mask. The mask's guardian launched an assault on Yomi, halting the scream of pain. Thanks to the mask's protector, the cursed monster's skill was reduced by 50%. Then Chaos began its assault. Chansun powered up with Fragarach. He managed to block several of the enemy's strikes. Yet the gap in power was immense, and the hero sustained damage. Chaos unleashed a curse. The souls of fallen allies left their bodies, targeting the hero. But Chansun instantly obliterated them with the spears he had summoned at the start of the battle. Then he amplified the sword's penetration with lightning, and struck Chaos with it. While the monster pulled Fragarach from its shoulder, the boy touched it and stole its skills. Thus, Chansun became the new boss of Yomi. The cursed monster immediately unleashed its scream of agony against Chaos. The half-tiger aimed to end it instantly. But at the last moment, Chansun stopped it, severing the monster's limbs. Now, all he had to do was hold on for 1 more minute, because after that, Yomi would devour Chaos's soul. The enraged boss transformed into a colossal beast. It lunged at the hero with all its might, but the boy summoned the devil mask with its guardian once more. That was what shielded Chansun from several of Chaos's curses. Alongside magical attacks, the hero had to fend off physical strikes as well. Yet thanks to Grid World, he handled it flawlessly. His goal was simple: survive 50 more seconds. After that, Yomi would complete its task. Another attempt by Chaos to strike with the white tiger failed. To hold off the relentless assault, Chansun created a chain. He immobilized the enemy. Then he infused it with lightning. But in a few seconds, the monster broke free. It activated Shockwave Impact and unleashed all its fury in the next strike. Fortunately, Chansun dodged the blow. He realized the enemy no longer controlled its power. It knew it was losing. Suddenly, Chaos sacrificed its paw. In return, it gained the skill Black Claws and used it immediately. Sharp spikes rained down on the hero. He couldn't avoid the damage and now couldn't use mana for an hour. Thrilled, Chaos lunged at Chansun, hoping to finish him. Only 10 seconds remained until Yomi's Soul Devour activated. The hero used the corrupted mana and summoned Beth. The vampire used her bloodbath to halt one of the 4 evils. She held it back until it was Yomi's turn. Chaos tried once more to strike Chansun with a shockwave, but it was too late. Yomi began devouring its former boss. Then it returned to the tube from which it had emerged. Now the artifact belonged to Chansun. In the past, Yomi had been killed, so the item was lost. But this time, an unexpected bonus remained. The hero completed the quest and went to claim the reward from the deity. Queen Sobol admitted she was impressed, yet she sensed the boy already knew events in advance. Curious, she touched his forehead to see the truth, but she immediately recoiled. Chansun had already been chosen by a deity far mightier than her. so her judgment was merely a stepping stone in his plan. Sobol granted the boy the title of hero. All his stats surged to their maximum, and he reached B rank. As a reward for the quest, Chonsun received a golden bow that boosted penetration power by 200%. Alongside it came a seed of a blue flower, nurtured in the celestial gardens. The bloom contained an astonishing reserve of mana. To make the flower blossom, it must be fed items brimming with mana. It was time for Chonsun to head home. There were still some matters waiting for him. Around this time, the city of the hero was engulfed in utter chaos. After the rift in the sky began to glow, the Death Angel appeared. At first, the people were thrilled, but when the system revealed itself, everyone realized this being had come for their souls. The main quest had begun, Night of the Departed. Panicked, the citizens began to flee. Fortunately, Taehan arrived just in time to confront the monstrosity. Everything unfolded exactly as Chonsun had predicted. The Death Angel unleashed bone spikes against the Berserker, erupting from the ground. As Taehan dodged, the spikes detonated. Once again, luck favored the Berserker. He understood that half his strength would not suffice to defeat the foe. To pierce the Death Angel's defenses, he would have to unleash his full fiery might. Taehan charged into battle. Initially, the creature held back the Berserker's flames, but ultimately, the players struck a devastating blow. The Death Angel collapsed lifelessly to the ground. Yet seconds later, black energy swirled around it, reviving the angel. Luckily, at that moment, Chonsun appeared through the portal. He ended the monstrosity with a shot from the golden bow. Preventing the Death Angel's revival required burning its body, or, even better, striking it with divine power immediately, as the hero had done. Chonsun claimed the Black Key for defeating the first quest monster. The activation of the World Calamity, Night of the Departed, was triggered by the first hero's appearance. The dead would now enter the human world. Chonsun had to prepare and venture into the realm of the dead to stop them. He had 1 week. Each passing day, the challenge would grow, fail, and the world would be swallowed forever by the Night of the Departed. At the same time, a system notification of the World Calamity reached the villain's son. But his mission was entirely different from Chonsun's. The blonde had to block players from completing the quest and stop the hero. He was stunned to see that the target was Chonsun himself. Sun noticed the hero moving as if he knew every event in advance. He deduced that Chonsun would seek an artifact to help defeat the calamity, and he decided to go there as well, waiting for the opponent to strike first. To prepare, Sun immediately acquired a dagger capable of generating spatial rifts. Unaware, Chonsun embarked on the side quest, Palace of the Fanatics. He had to defeat vampire supporters and locate the hidden boss. With his grid world skill, the hero cleared the first task effortlessly. As a reward, he obtained a chalice used by vampires to drink blood. It would prove useful for crafting a powerful item. Chonsun still needed magical stones, but time was running short, so he summoned his familiar and assigned the task. Beth felt humiliated, tasked with doing the dirty work, but Beth summoned the bloodied hands of her crimson bath and seized the crust. Chonsun himself rushed off in search of the hidden boss. Relying on his memories, he quickly located the secret zone. Yet he was stunned to find that all the monsters inside were already dead. He knew for certain that only one person could enter a spatial rift, but here was Sun, and he held the reward for defeating the hidden boss, the vampire elixir. Almost instantly, Sun lunged into attack. After striking, the blonde was sure Chonsun hadn't reacted in time, but he had miscalculated. The hero blocked the attack with the devil mask shield. Then he immediately countered, striking at the enemy. Sun couldn't believe it. With the hero title, Chonsun's stats had surged dramatically. Though in sheer speed, the blonde still had the edge. The battle was escalating rapidly. Sun barely dodged an arrow from the golden bow. Immediately, Chonsun activated the demon mask magic. A smoky veil concealed his location completely, and he directed Fragarak straight at the enemy. While Sun blocked the sword strike, Chonsun reappeared behind him. He touched the enemy and used the Greed of the Ruler ring to copy abilities. Now Chonsun's sword mastery had reached its peak. Sun spun sharply, attempting to strike the hero, but Chonsun anticipated it, presenting the poisoned Naga Mistress sword. Once again, the blonde was poisoned. Sun realized he couldn't win without amplification. Instantly, he opened the shop and purchased an explosive potion. It enhanced all his stats to the max. Fully powered up by 200%, Sun prepared to continue the fight. He readied the third sword technique, Destructive Phantom Storm. Thanks to the copied skills, Chonsun didn't fear the attack. The technique had specific sword strikes, despite resembling a storm. But knowing the strikes allowed him to easily nullify the powerful assault. And that's exactly what the hero did. Defeated, Sun attempted to flee using a spatial rift generator, but the moment he grabbed the dagger, Chansun severed his hand. The hero assumed the villain had no resurrection skill left and decided to interrogate him. It turned out Sun, like the others of his kind, had betrayed players in his world to survive, and now they were sent to this world to sow chaos and destruction. They had sold their souls, forced to obey orders just to live. After this confession, Sun erupted in rage. Returning to Beth, the hero noticed she had already handled everything. He activated Gather and combined the vampire's chalice, magical stones, and the vampire elixir. The fusion produced an item which Chansun handed to Beth. The vampire was astonished. It turned out the hero had ventured into this dungeon for her sake. Beth swallowed the newly formed gem and instantly felt an incredible surge of power. It was an overwhelmingly amazing sensation. Instead of the power boost the item was supposed to grant, Beth regained 3/5 of her lost strength. Now it was time to enter the dungeon of the global catastrophe. But the dead weren't waiting around. Chansun had spent 6 hours in the dungeon, and in that time, the disaster had fully activated. When he returned, the giant skeleton was already spreading poisonous mist across the land. The system glitched again. Players had 72 hours to form a group and stop the calamity. The giant's toxic mist was devastating. Anything it touched turned into the land of the dead. Destruction erupted across the world. Chansun couldn't understand why events meant to happen 2 years later were unfolding now. Suddenly, Dojin appeared. He reported that Taehan and the head of the Xinhua Guild had gone to take on the giant. But that was the wrong path. Chansun immediately tried to call the berserker, but he was out of range. Then he remembered the twin ring and hoped he could contact Taehan that way. Luckily, the berserker answered. The hero ordered the guild leader to retreat and head to the nearest station. The giant skeleton was merely a vessel for spreading the poisonous mist. Moreover, the players didn't have enough strength to destroy the dead. The real threat lay somewhere else entirely. Chansun and Dojin hurried to the guild office to secure valuable items. Along the way, they encountered countless human victims. It was the work of a gang of unknown awakened beings. Each victim bore the characteristic mark of a vampire bite on their neck. Beth suspected Isabella's involvement. The heroes guessed the attackers must be nearby, but in fact, they were right on top of them. One of the villains attacked Dojin. If Chansun hadn't created a shield in time, it would have ended tragically. The attacker's power was overwhelming. Then Beth leapt into the fray. She quickly dispatched one of the vampires, but another appeared instantly, lunging at her. Thanks to her mist skill, the vampire avoided taking damage. Dojin was stunned to learn that Beth was Chansun's familiar, but there was no time for explanations. The hero charged into battle. Nearby, another female vampire was present. She empowered her allies with magic, but while her attention was on the allied fight, Dojin managed to get close enough. The players executed their strategy flawlessly, eliminating the entire vampire gang. It turned out all the attackers were former prisoners. Suddenly, Dojin's phone rang. It was Secretary Minhisu calling. She begged for help. The Massacre Guild had been attacked by unknown awakened beings, and they had already located the girl. The call cut off abruptly. Chansun and Dojin raced to the guild building, but what awaited them there was a horrifying scene. Bodies of humans were strewn everywhere. All had fallen to the vampires. Yet among the victims, Minhisu was nowhere to be seen. The team decided to split up. Beth would check the lower floors. Dojin would move through the middle of the building. Chansun ascended straight to the top, to the Massacre Guild's office. Waiting there were 2 A-rank vampires, Nobis and Sheena. They had expected a true hunter, but assumed Chansun was just another weakling. Meanwhile, Chansun spotted Minhisu's bag with the enemies. He wanted to find out where the secretary was. Instead, he got a vicious attack from Nobis. Chansun raised his shield and immediately unleashed a dozen arrows at the vampire. If not for his armor, Nobis would have been struck. Chansun kept raining arrows from the world of the grid, but the vampire blocked with a shield. The hero didn't relent, but Sheena intervened, stopping the attack. She shielded her comrade with a black aura. Once the protection faded, Chansun struck with a cunning weapon creation attack. This time, he severed Nobis's arm, but delivering a fatal blow proved impossible. Sheena deflected the strike with her aura. It was so powerful, Chansun was thrown backward. Before his eyes, Nobis's arm regenerated. It was clear. Without enhanced divine power, they couldn't be defeated. So when the 2 vampires lunged, Chansun raised the Devil Mask shield. Then he shot a storm of arrows into their backs. The vampires laughed at the seemingly feeble assault, but it was merely a distraction. While the villains shielded themselves from the arrows, Chansun fired a single arrow from his golden bow. Nobis was finished. Then the hero severed Sheena's legs. He didn't rush to kill her, planning to ask a few questions first. Just then, Dojin and Beth arrived. They found Min-Hisu alive. The secretary hadn't been killed, and now Chansun knew why. The villains had planned to use her to obtain guild treasures and deliver them to Isabella. Luckily, the heroes had stopped them in time. Suddenly, Chansun was contacted via the Twin Rings by Tihen. Taeyeon and Sten were surrounded by vampires. The berserker urged Chansun to head to the station, but the connection cut off. The Twin Rings' telepathic link had expired. At that moment, Taeyeon and the Massacre Guild leader were already fending off vampires. The enemies weren't too strong individually, but they were numerous. Suddenly, Isabella appeared. She had expected more from S-Rank hunters. Without hesitation, Sten tried to kill the vampire leader and charged at Isabella. But the vampire instantly stopped the attacker. She activated blood magic, and from Sten's shoulder, a web of red flowers sprouted. She didn't intend to kill Taeyeon yet, planning instead to use him and turn him into a vampire. She admitted that among all the awakened, only Chansun deserved her attention. He alone had shown staggering progress in his development. When Isabella's focus fully shifted to Taeyeon, Sten sprang into action. He deliberately exposed himself to the vampire, baiting her into letting her guard down. At the perfect moment, Sten unleashed the Abyss Strike and hit the villainess. But Isabella immediately countered with a swarm of mystical butterflies. Their pollen spread, enveloping the hunters in a thick smoke veil. Nothing could be seen through it. Moreover, the vampire's skill reduced opponents' power by 30% and slowly drained their mana. Steen tried to pierce the veil, but failed. Then Taeyeon stepped in. He instructed Sten to take all civilians to a safe zone. To break through the smoke, the berserker unleashed the full force of his explosion skill. It worked. A tear appeared in the barrier. Seeing Taeyeon had a plan, Sten complied and began retreating. Meanwhile, the berserker prepared his secret weapon, Heaven's Flame. Fire engulfed the surrounding area in a blazing inferno. At the same time, the guild secretary suggested going to assist their boss, but Chansun assured her Taeyeon could handle it. Minutes later, the hero's words proved true. Taeyeon called to confirm he was safe. He immediately thanked Chansun for the reliable weapon. However, after using the skill, the weapon did break. Taeyeon defeated Isabella thanks to the skill book Chansun had given him. Afterwards, Taeyeon and Chansun agreed to meet at the guild office to plan their next moves. After speaking with Taeyeon, the secretary handed the hero an item. This relic had long ago accidentally fallen into the hands of the Massacre Guild leader. It had been considered useless, yet the vampire scum tried to steal it from Hisu. The dwarf's sleeping stone reveals its true power only when a calamity strikes. Upon awakening, the owner gains the skill, Forge a Weapon That Slays Giants. Suddenly, everyone's attention was drawn to a system notification. The first night after the calamity activation approached, monsters would begin spawning worldwide. Defeating them would earn points exchangeable for items. But the main objective remained, to defeat the field boss. Chansun crafted several items to neutralize the giant skeleton's poisonous smoke. This would make the Massacre Guild a safe haven for civilians. And the hero could focus on the field boss, setting out to locate it immediately. Entering the monster's zone, Chansun's task was to awaken the dwarf's sleeping stone. The field boss mesmerizes humans with its requiem before consuming their souls. This grants it the ability to resurrect elsewhere after death. Chansun hoped the enemy hadn't already charmed too many people. But upon entering the temple, he realized the victims were already numerous. Among them sat the archer goddess, Han Chia. Chansun quietly approached and freed her from the trance. It turned out that after the calamity's activation, Han Chia had begun evacuating civilians. But vampires soon appeared. During the fight, the goddess lost consciousness, waking up in the temple. The hero realized the vampires were attempting to summon the boss. He took Han Chia with him, determined to stop the ritual. At that moment, a vampire performed the ceremony to summon the field boss. Completing the ritual would allow him to survive the apocalypse and travel to another world. But Chansun appeared instantly. He obliterated the ceremonial hall's guardian and pierced the vampire with a divine arrow. Immediately, another vampire emerged, attacking Chansun. She proved to be formidable. This one had mastered aura manipulation, combined with lightning. Facing her assaults was no easy task. Moreover, she arrived with reinforcements. But Han Chia quickly dealt with them. Beth joined the fray. Using blood magic, she eliminated anyone threatening Chansun. Even the aura user fell easily to Beth. By then, Han Chia had wiped out all external vampires and joined the team. Chansun believed the mission was complete, but a system alert appeared. The vampire performing the ritual sacrificed his body to summon the field boss. In an instant, the Dark Archbishop emerged, exceeding level A. This boss could consume the souls of nearby humans, converting them into a legion of the undead. The monster activated its skill. Its energy began enveloping Chonsun's body. But in that moment, the hero remembered a method. He swiftly closed the distance to the monster. Using rare materials recorded from his past life, Chonsun activated Gather. In an instant, a sword composed of fused human souls materialized in his hands. With it, he could slay the Dark Archbishop and restore the souls to their rightful owners.